I'm going to give you a little bit of general background about Governor's Highway Safety Program. And then that will take about 30 minutes or so, depending on the level of questions that we get. Then from there, you're going to have the pleasure of hearing from Stacy Deans, who really is the expert in our grants process, and a little bit about his team. Hey, Deputy. Good. About the application process. And then following lunch, you'll be hearing from Bill Nath, who's with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, and you'll hear us use that acronym a whole lot. He will talk to you a little bit, and then we'll do an actual grant system demonstration, and there'll be opportunity for Q&A throughout. So let's go ahead and get started. How many of you have never worked with the Governor's Highway Safety Program before? This is new. Okay. So a fair number. Good. For those of you who have, this may be a little bit redundant, but I think it's important for us to cover it anyway. The Governor's Highway Safety Program works to promote traffic safety awareness and reduce the number of traffic crashes and fatalities in North Carolina. We do this in two ways. One is we have a lot of public initiatives that you may have heard of. The Click It or Ticket campaign, the Booze It and Lose It campaign, the No Need to Speed campaign, several other efforts that we do around impaired driving, other areas like pedestrian and bike safety. We work closely and fund the Bike Safe program. These are just, or the Watch For Me program is another. Bike Safe North Carolina is one specifically geared toward motorcycle safety. So these are just some of the things that the Governor's Highway Safety Program does. Now, for those of you good students in the class, I was never this type of person. I would say when I get to about slide 9, that's when you might want to take some notes. You're welcome to take notes now, but man, this is just more a general overview of what we do and how we do it. This is a virtually incomprehensible, probably hard to read org chart for the Governor's Highway Safety Program. We will have notes available much as we will have this video. So again, this is not something that you need to memorize now. The important thing to note here is that we have 2 assistant directors, one for the internal operations of the office, and that is Stacy Deans, who you'll be hearing from later. He manages all our grants operations and our finance operations. So these are the main folks. It's Stacy and his team that you'll be dealing with any grants questions, any related questions. That team are the folks to go to. We also have Cheryl Leonard, who's over here. She oversees our external operations, so any of our initiatives, if we're coming to your community and we're interested in doing something that has a public awareness component, it's her and her team that you work with on those issues. How the Highway Safety Program works. First of all, every state and every territory has got what's called a state highway safety office. It's always fun to go to these national meetings and see these folks from the Northern Marianas Islands, who are the state highway safety office representatives from the Northern Marianas Islands. They've traveled 17 days to get to your conference that lasts 2. But so every state and territory has this. In North Carolina, it is called the Governor's Highway Safety Program. It's not necessarily called that in other states. And our job is to, I mentioned the grants, but we're responsible for distributing highway safety funds for highway safety projects, funds that are federal that we received from NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. That's our job around the grant funding process. In my role, I serve 2 roles. I am both the director of the office, and I am appointed what's called the Governor's Rep for Highway Safety. The Governor's Representative for Highway Safety is responsible for completing the duties that are assigned by federal law to the governor related to traffic safety efforts. So I have both of those titles, and we are housed administratively in the North Carolina Department of Transportation. So, what funds do we distribute from NHTSA? Well, first of all, we have our base funds, Section 402 funds. These are generally, the funding amount is based on population, vehicle miles traveled, and a whole bunch of other calculations that the feds make. Our 402 funding is some that has a little more flexibility than some of our other funding. So we can put some of that 402 money to a variety of different topics that we feel are going to make a difference in traffic safety. Our Section 405 funds, on the other hand, is a little bit more prescriptive. So with our Section 405 funds, they have to be around these particular topic areas. Now, other states you'll find may get other 405 subtopics that we do not get, because the feds have been very, federal law sometimes has odd ways of calculating whether or not you're eligible for a 405 subgrant. So just understand these are those topic areas in which we have available funding this year in Section 405. And the non-motorized, by the way, that includes bike and ped and things of that nature. Now, here's the thing to note. We have what's called, any Star Trek fans in here? We have the Prime Directive from NHTSA. And our Prime Directive is this: everything you fund has got to be driven by data. Period. We've got to have data that justifies what we're going to fund. We have to, and that data has to show that the projects that we fund can impact North Carolina's statewide numbers around traffic fatalities. Okay? Now, what are some of the broad things the data is showing? One, it's showing that impaired driving, speeding, and unrestrained occupants are the leading causes of death and serious injury on our roadways. That is not brain surgery. That is common sense. I think we've known that it's been this way for 30, 40, 50 years. But these big three are still the major problems that we have to deal with in North Carolina. The largest numbers are in the urban areas, which makes common sense because that is where the people are. So, we see a few things that are on the rise. First, drug-impaired driving. Generally, in drug-impaired driving that is accompanied by what we call polyuse. People have used alcohol and other drugs. That is on the rise. We're also seeing pedestrian deaths are slowly, steadily rising in North Carolina. And I've just given you a few major things that the data show. So I encourage you, when you apply for your grant, you must tell us how the work that you're doing is going to impact the area that you'd like to impact vis-a-vis the state numbers. If you're doing an occupant protection grant, for instance, you are interested in doing a project around occupant protection, show us how this is going to make a difference in the entire state. It doesn't need to be focused. It doesn't need to be a statewide grant. In fact, many of you want to do things locally. That's fine, but tell us how this can potentially impact the numbers in the area and why that area is an area that we need to focus on and can feel that it can really impact our statewide numbers. Now, another thing for you all to be aware of, and this should go without saying, but your mere presence here does not mean we're going to be able to award you a grant. All right? I just said that, you'd be surprised. But the fact that you're here doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be able to give you a grant. In fact, after you go through my presentation, you may say, I'm not sure that this fits. That's fine. But we want to make sure that you're aware of what we fund and and the broad areas we fund, the parameters in which we make our decisions before you get too far in the process. All right? A little bit about the road to our FY21 grants. I tried to get fancy with this slide. I did a horrible job of it, so I hope it gives you a basic idea of what we're trying to get at. Right now, we are in, GHSB follows a federal fiscal year, okay? So our FY 2020 grants began in October of 2019. Our FY 2021 grants, those that are awarded, will start October 1, 2020. And we are on the road to those 2021 grants right now. And what I've got here is I illustrate where things start. That should be January there, January 1st through the 31st. The fact is, and Stacy's going to talk about this a little bit later, you actually need to, if you're interested in applying, you need to start a little bit sooner by trying to get access to our grant system. And Stacy's going to explain a little bit about how to do that. But in January, the 1st through the 31st, the eligibility for grants, the grant system is open. It's open for business, and that's when you can apply for your grant. All right? It closes the last day of January. And from February till about May, our committee internally goes through every grant application with a fine-tooth comb to make a decision about what we can fund and what we can't with our limited dollars. Okay? And you say to yourself, well, February to May, that's a long time. But think about it. You're going through piece by piece 200 grants. So you've really got to be able to study that. And that committee includes all of my grants team, the folks that work with Stacy. We have gotten outside input in advance to figure out what are the priorities for us to fund. But it takes a while for us to make that decision. Then, that's when we're going to be reviewing and prioritizing funding. We'll notify the successful applicants and help them finalize their grant application. It is rare, not impossible, but rare, that the grant that you put in, if you're asked to go to the second stage, is completely untouched by our folks. So in other words, we may ask you to make a few tweaks here and there. So you will be notified one way or the other if you are given the opportunity to move to the next level. From May to June, we generally spend our time creating our state highway safety plan, which is essentially our application to NHTSA, and prospective grantees have that time to, folks who have received that initial letter have an opportunity to work on and finalize that grant application. From July to September, that's when we're generally working with prospective grantees, those who have been notified that you can move forward to get the various conditions and approvals necessary for us to be able to provide your money. And Stacy's going to provide a little more background on that. And October 1, 2020 is when the grant funding starts. Every year it happens. We've given somebody a letter that's saying your grant starts October 1st, 2020. And on September 15th, somebody's going to make a purchase. And we're going to have to say, no, we're not going to be giving you any, reimbursing you for any expenses that are expended prior to the time your grant starts. Always happens. So we try to let you know in advance. October 1st does not mean September 15th. So, what are some snapshots of the things that we fund? Well, you can find a list of the things that we're funding for this year, FY 2020, on our website. And I urge you to look through that. That gives you a basic idea of the types of things we funded in the past. This year, we funded 93 external grants. By external, I mean those that are in the community. Okay? Now, 16 of those have gone to state agencies. 11 of those has gone to research organizations such as the good folks at UNC. They've got their Highway Safety Research Center. NC State has got ITRI, which is the Transportation Research and Education Institute. We fund several local police departments and sheriff's offices. I would say I've got here about half. I think it's actually a little bit less than that. But our law enforcement grants include, our law enforcement liaisons, who are folks that work with us substantially out in the community to help get law enforcement involved in the efforts we do. Our Bike Safe program, our drug recognition experts, generally associated with police departments. We've helped fund drug and alcohol labs. We have partnerships with various nonprofits. We have interesting projects occurring with several hospitals across the state. And we have a variety of different projects. We have projects around, as we mentioned before, traffic records. They're specifically related to traffic records. So we work with DMV and other vendors around that. We have projects with Mothers Against Drunk Driving around impaired driving. So that just gives you an overall snapshot of the types of things that we fund. This is not written in stone. This is not to say that it's going to be roughly the same percentages in the future, because our needs change and the data changes. What are the factors that we consider? First, it's that prime directive. What is data driven? Will this move the needle on traffic deaths and injuries? So, we've got to be able to prove that the project that you're giving to us is going to be able to reduce in some way, cumulatively or otherwise, traffic safety deaths and serious injuries, not just in your community, but statewide. So, if you are in, Wake County and you apply for a grant, we're going to look at how that grant potentially can make a difference in Wake County, and then how that can help us on a statewide level with our overall numbers. All right? We're going to look at, does the grantee have a track record with us? In other words, if you've got a track record with us and it's bad, we're going to remember that. Now, here's an example. If you're with a local police department and 12 years ago there were issues with a grant, 20 years ago there was an issue with a grant, there's probably different leadership in that local department now, and we factor that in. But if you applied last year or the previous year, there were concerns with us being able to get in the information that we need, getting the quarterly reports that we need, there were reporting issues. We're going to remember that. Many of you are new, so I don't think that's as relevant to you all, but nevertheless, I think it's important. Can the grantee carry out the grant goals and the reporting needs? If you are with a very small group, keep in mind that we have very specific reporting requirements. And so we're going to look at, do you have the staffing available to do the reporting that we need on a regular and consistent basis? Also, I mentioned to you the GHSP, we have a group that makes determinations about grants. That is our grants team here. The way we always work is that we are first going to look at our existing grantees that oftentimes have grant projects that are 2 or 3 years. We're going to look first and see if we can continue to fund them. And then, based on the money that we've got left over, we're going to be looking at new grants. Okay? We virtually always do have funding for new grants. That's not to discourage you in any way. But if you've got, if we're with a particular, we have a grant with a particular office that has a 3-year grant, every year they still have to reapply. And so we're going to look at those first. Finally, who are you going to call? As I mentioned to you before when I mentioned the org chart, if you've got claims questions, if you've got, not just claim questions, if you've got, in your case, application questions, you're going to call your grants specialist. You're going to call Stacy's team. These are the folks that we've got on that team now. We got one vacancy for one of our grant specialists. But these are the folks you're going to call on those questions. Don't call anybody else. Don't call me. I expect these guys to know the details better than I do. And they do. So call your grants specialist for grants related questions. If you've got, there's a community event that you're doing that you'd like to have some publicity on, or if we've asked to come to your community on one of our statewide kickoffs, as we're doing in Durham in just a couple of weeks on the 16th as we kick off our holiday Booze and Lose It campaign. It's Cheryl's team, Miracle King is there in the back as well with our staff. These are the folks to call with those questions. And these are the folks to probably not call, but who may call you. There's finance. Our finance team is sitting over here with Deidre Joyner, Shannon, Daniels. We've got our finance team may be calling you if there are specific questions about claims, specific questions about numbers, and things of that nature. That is what I've got. What are some questions that you might have? How have we confused you so far? You're just very okay. You're just very shy. If you're not confused yet, I'm now going to turn it over to Stacy Deans. Stacy's going to give you some of the specific details in a number of these projects. And Stacy is an extremely knowledgeable resource and is my right-hand person on issues related to grants. And he supervises a fantastic team. They're very helpful. They will be very helpful to you. And I think you'll find that the information he provides will give you a little more background.
First of all, Mark is way, way, way too kind. I'm nothing more than a cop with a calculator. I'm a retired RPD major. Have been working with Governor's Highway Safety now for the last, I'm sorry, we're going to stop everything. Bill Naff has entered the room. Bill is our Bill is our NHTSA representative, or our NHTSA contact, and we are very fortunate to have him. So I am certainly sorry to put you on the spot, but thank you for being here. We're fortunate to have you here. I would simply ask from you that if I say anything that is even remotely incorrect or wrong, please correct me. And I've got to get this stuff hooked up somehow. So not that I need a microphone, because I'm going to be shouting and screaming and hollering at you. But
so this one goes to the
do we need both of them?
If you can shout loud enough, you won't need that one.
I don't need that one.
But you definitely need that for the video.
Okay.
Just pocket.
All right.
Stacy, I'm going to give you that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Back on October 1st, we gave a grant orientation class that basically primarily focused on the entire process. This particular class right here is going to be kind of application centric, meaning how do you file an application with the Governor's Highway Safety Program for a grant. If you currently have a grant, I know there's some folks in here that might have a grant right now. Some of this may seem a little redundant. However, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the process. I'm going to talk about some specifics. There's a lot of cops in the room, so anytime you start talking about, we need to go over some stuff about law enforcement and enforcement grants with federal funds through the Governor's Highway Safety Program. We will go through the application itself and touch on what we look for in an application, what we're going to be working towards, go in a little bit more detail with respect to the timeline that Mark talked about, and then I'm going to try to get online this afternoon. I got online a while ago. Hopefully everything will work. We're going to go into, we see something completely different than what y'all see. I mean, GHSP from the grant perspective, from the grant system perspective. So I wanted to know kind of what do y'all see, because you're going to call with questions. And we need to try to be able, most cases, all we can do is kind of forward you to our IT support to answer some of those questions when you have problems. Hopefully this will help all of us kind of, help you through and be able to help you first thing. Before I do that though, I hate to put these guys on the spot. Warren Smith is our planning and program evaluation manager with Governor's Highway Safety. Warren also is overseeing, he just got promoted to that position, was our traffic records coordinator prior to that. He's a traffic records guru. To his right is Bob Stevens. Bob oversees, many of you, if you're a cop in the room, you know who Bob Stevens is. Bob's a retired Garner police lieutenant, and also handles a lot of our law enforcement grants. He handles our STEP program, where you do all your reporting for GHSP events. To Bob's right is Kevin Buster. Kevin was a Henderson cop for many years. He's worked for the Governor's Crime Commission and is very knowledgeable in grants and what you can and can't do. And then if you have, from the western part, the Charlotte area of the state, David Williams. David, if you don't mind. David has been with, probably is the longest tenured, one of the longest tenured grant specialists. Well, he is that we have. David oversees our impaired driving program. I'm sorry, Kevin does the OP, our occupant protection, bike ped, and so forth. So let's start talking a little bit about the application process. All right, the first thing you need to do is you have got to, real quick, you've got a program director's guide here. Some of the stuff in there needs to be updated, but we are going to, which we'll do. What you're going to see up here is going to be a little more probably up to date. All right, we manage our grant system through an online grants management system. You have to have access to this system to be able to apply for a grant. So if there's anybody sitting in this room right now that is thinking about applying for a grant with the Governor's Highway Safety Program, and you do not have access to our grants management system, when you leave here today and when you get to work tomorrow, you need to go online, find the grant access authorization form on our website, complete it, and forward it to GHSP. We have folks within GHSP that will take that form, they'll work what we need to work with our grant system and with our IT folks and get you access to the grant system. You can have up to, how many, David? Three people, I think, that have access to it. So that's going to be the first thing you need to do. It's also a way, through the grants management system, you're going to file an application. If you're awarded a grant, you're going to manage your grant, and we're going to help you manage your grant through the grant access, through our grant system. That includes filing claims for reimbursement. If you want to make some changes to your budget, do a change request or a budget revision, you're going to submit it through there. And then you're going to communicate, a lot of you are going to communicate primarily with your grant specialist through the grants management system. There's a way to make notes. If you send us a claim and we need to have a change made to it, we're going to send that back to you through the grants management system and go from there. This is what the form looks like. And it is in the first page of the Program Director's Guidebook if you can't see it real well. You're going to complete the section 1 for a user ID and password. If you ever forget what your PIN number, you're going to put two things in here. You're going to put a 8-digit secure number right here, and then there's going to give you a PIN number down here. If by chance you ever forget that, you can call us for the 8-digit number, and then you'll have to get up with IT and they can give you your PIN number. That 4-digit PIN number right there is what you're going to use to actually PIN or electronically sign a grant document, okay? Let me just make sure I cover what I need to cover here, folks. I apologize. Okay, we administer federal funds received from Bill Naff and the National Highway Safety Traffic Administration. Those are the uniform codes that tell us what we can and cannot do with the funds, or what you can and cannot do with the funds, what we can and cannot do with the funds. If you're awarded a grant, we're going to send you something called an agreement of conditions. Basically, it has a lot of the federal codes and the federal requirements that are in there. It's an 8-page document. You need to review it very carefully. In the back of this guidebook right here, there's an example of an agreement of conditions. It has the federal provisions that we are required by the federal government to have in there. And again, Mark touched on this a little bit earlier. We work on a federal fiscal year, meaning it starts October 1st, and we will cover spending from October 1st to September 30th. Nothing before, nothing after September 30th. We have to start early for FY21, which will start October 1st of 2020. We will start at taking applications January 1st, and they we'll take them through January 31st. That means start the application process. Folks, you're going to start an application, you're going to submit it. I'm going to assign it to one of these 4 or 5 folks sitting back here. They're going to review it. They're going to want some revisions made to it, and you'll go back and forth with them. As long as you hit submit by January 31st, then we're able to consider your application for the 2021 fiscal year. And look, if there are any questions, if I'm unclear on anything and you want to stop me, then by all means, raise your hand and or just stammer out like I'm standing up here doing. All right, we partner with several different types of organizations. Mark talked on this earlier. State agencies, we have grants with our Department of Administration on some bike ped efforts. We have a DOT grant with Watch for Me and our pedestrian safety. We have our Department of Insurance runs our child passenger safety program and do an outstanding job and throughout the state, working with different coalitions and teaching folks to properly, not only teach folks to properly install car seats in cars, but also teaching folks to teach folks to properly install car seats. We have a number of with state agencies. We work with HSRC. HSRC does a lot for us with the University of North Carolina. They help us put together what we're required to report to NHTSA, what we report to NHTSA, and when we apply for our grant for federal funds to the state of North Carolina through what we call Highway Safety Plan. And then at the end of the year, we're currently working on an annual report to NHTSA that tells us how we're telling them or reporting back to them how we did in this previous fiscal year. So at some point in the next couple of weeks, we'll be finalizing that with NHTSA and or with HSRC and forwarding the results of that to NHTSA. We also work with, Mark talked about working with ITRI at NC State. They maintain the Vision Zero website, which if you've not been on that website, I certainly encourage you to do so. When you apply for a grant, we're going to give you access to fatality statistics for all the counties in the state of North Carolina, all 100 counties, and it's going to be broken down into actually this is on our website. The most recent data we have access to that we can use to evaluate or go in and look at grant applications is 2014 to 2018. We work on a 5-year average. It's also broken down into a number of different categories for speeding, impaired driving, unrestrained. We get into young driver, bike ped, or pedestrian fatalities, bicycle fatalities, motorcycle fatalities. Yes.
I was just going to say that if you have additional data that is helpful to us, please include that in the application, but you cannot do that in lieu of the data that you're going to get here.
Absolutely. We're going to go in, when we go in and actually enter a grant this afternoon, I'll show you what, typically we work off of county data, okay? A small municipality, if you're fortunate, you've probably not had you might not have had a fatality in several years. So you're going to want to work off so you're going to go back to what's going on in your county. You look at Wake County, for instance. We're one of the largest counties in the state, one of the most populated in the state. We have the second largest police department in the state, municipal police department in Raleigh PD. But there are probably another 8 to 10 municipalities around Wake County. But when we welcome information about what's going on in the town of Wendell or in the town of Knightdale or Zebulon or Garner. All right, but typically you're going to want to include your county data as well. A lot of folks have better, are a step ahead in crash mapping using their municipality's GIS. By all means, if you have that included, okay? The reason, me personally, I like the county data and like for you to use what the county data is that we're able to provide to you. That's how you're going to be evaluated. You're going to have goals and objectives in your grant. And we're going to talk about this in a lot more detail, but your goal is going to be, let's say that in your county, you are ranked in the top 10 in impaired driving fatalities. Your goal is going to be to reduce those impaired driving fatalities. If you are a police department looking for a DWI task force or a DWI officer, your goal is to reduce in your county impaired driving deaths. All right, and the way you're going to do that is one of your first objectives is with the enforcement money we're going to give you, you're going to put an officer in there to go out and arrest drunks, and you're going to increase the number of DWI arrests in your jurisdiction. Okay? Nonprofit organizations like MAD, we have some really good partners in up in in the east with young drivers and distracted driving. Law enforcement agencies, we showed a slide earlier that said I think 43 law enforcement agencies or 46 or whatever it was out of 93 external grants last year. They're not all enforcement grants, okay? 11 of those are our LELs. Our state, we have divided, Bob has divided into 11 different regions. If you're a cop sitting in the room, you should know, I'm sure you know who the LEL is in your region or who the county coordinator is. It is a network of folks that we work with across the state that can get out our message to all our law enforcement partners and to whom you can communicate with to help you with your efforts. 11 LEL grants, 6 or 7 Bike Safe LEL grants, our motorcycle safety program, the Bike Safe program. SHP coordinates that now. We have that broken down into 6 regions across the state. And then we have some drug and alcohol testing labs. We've got one in Pitt County, we've got one in New Hanover County. We have financed some equipment with the SBI, some chromatographs to do some drug testing. And as you know, there is 3 machines across the state. Law enforcement partners in here know how frustrating or how difficult it is to get drug and alcohol results back from the state lab. Hopefully, as they have these machines online now, it will expedite the process where you're getting back results so these things don't get lost in the court system. All right, we've got to touch on it. Would be remiss if I didn't touch on law enforcement grants. I apologize, but it is enforcement is a big part of traffic safety and highway safety. So this is what these things look like with if we are providing funding for a position. It used to be we provided for the position, a full-time position. We're going to talk in a little bit of detail, and I'm going to try to glean over this as quickly as I can. And during a break, you could talk with any of us. It is basically, we're not paying for positions any longer. We are paying for enforcement hours. Whereas it used to be, if you're working on a 28-day cycle and you're talking about 164 hours, 160 hours, 40 hours a week, whatever it is, It used to be we paid that 160 hours. Unless they went off and did something like SWAT training or something that was just not applicable at all to highway safety efforts. We basically paid for those positions, the salary, the fringe, the whole kit and caboodle. We can't do that anymore. We're not going to do that anymore. We are paying for the amount, the time, the hours spent on the road enforcing, doing traffic enforcement. Now, if you have a traffic safety personnel, we're funding a traffic safety position. Typically, we do that for 3 years. The first year, the federal share is 85%, state and local 15%. Second year, 70, 30. Third year, 50-50. If it's a DWI, primary, just strictly DWI enforcement, DWI personnel, we funded 100%. The first year is for 4 years, and then we go 85-15, 70-30, 50-50. And we do have some teams across the state where we have funded them longer than that. We're looking at maybe 25% federal share, 75% their share. Now, that can be a challenge. It was a challenge for us at RPD because those are positions, if we're funding it, if we're providing you funding for it, we all have challenges when it comes to keeping all our positions filled. Those positions have to be filled. They have to remain filled. That can be a little bit challenging from time to time from an administrative and a hiring standpoint. So you just need to make sure going into this you understand, we all understand what we're looking at. All right, so I've talked about this a little bit. NHTSA has changed how highway safety positions, officers are allowed to fund LEO positions. And that began when the grant year started October 1st of 2020. Let me catch up real quick. This applies to law enforcement positions, and it applies to not just cops. They're not picking on cops or anything. They recognize how important it is too in our battle with keeping folks safe on the roadway. It's just what it comes down to is they'll no longer pay for positions. They're paying for enforcement hours. What did this change from one grant year from FY19 to FY20? We can't purchase uniforms anymore. Basically, the way the feds look at it, the federal government looks at it, there's a general cost for doing government, especially in administering the law. And it's the job of those municipalities to put their cops in uniforms, and so the feds, we can't pay for that anymore. For a lot of people, that included the radio. The handheld, that was typically what was purchased on that line item within a grant. And so for any position that we fund, the enforcement hours for that cop, then you're going to have to still furnish him with a uniform and or uniforms and a handheld radio. And we'll get in a little bit more about what we will pay for. Activity hours. Let me see. What is reimbursable? Enforcement hours, highway traffic safety training, court time related to traffic safety enforcement, and if you're working holidays. All right, what doesn't that include from a law enforcement standpoint? It doesn't include training. Again, general cost of doing government. The firearms training, in-service training, we cannot, yes sir?
The court related to highway safety enforcement, we're still debating that. I will let you know, I'm waiting on an answer. I've been arguing that all morning.
We had a saying many when I was a detective. The situation is fluid. Events are unfolding as we speak. That slides in there because I asked a question. So it is. There are changes. We have learned a little bit. We've been in the grant year now for not quite 3 months, just 2 months, and we're still working our way through this. I beg forgiveness on it. It's a new guideline, and we're all learning from it. more to come on whether you can pay them to go to court or not, or whether we can reimburse you to pay for them going to court or not. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah, absolutely. One, please.
I know it's catching some people a little off guard and the way you usually do business. Our chief counsel has been looking a lot at some of the grants, and the new super circular that came out, it's 2 CFR 200, which is the new federal regulations covering all grants, all federal grants, not just highway safety grants, but all federal grants. And there's a section in there that says general cost of government. And what the general cost of government is federal funds can't be used to pay for anything that a local government, state government, or agency usually would pay for. And law enforcement is usually one of those. However, our program depends a lot on highway safety enforcement. It's a big part of our programs, and we understand that, so we can pay for the law enforcement activities that are going on there, but there's certain things connected to those activities that are general cost of government. State says uniforms, radios, guns, things like that. Police officer needs, recertification, CPR, range, what have you. That's all general police services that is provided by the state or the local agency. The federal government can't pay for that. We can pay for the enforcement hours that it's going to be doing out there. Like I said, the jury's still out on this court time. I'm still arguing that, where if you're writing the citations on overtime or regular enforcement time, if there's some way to segue out of that, what court time is related to those citations or arrests, that might be an option. It's probably going to be a record-keeping nightmare. So that's kind of the background of how this has all come about. For the longest time, you paid for positions. We no longer pay positions, and it's not just law enforcement. We're talking prosecutors, special prosecutors, things like that. Any government agency or state agency, local agency of a general cost of government who has a position that they're asking us to fund, we can pay for those activity hours, but not a lot of stuff that's connected with it. We can pay for the fringe benefits that go with those hours. So that is a big plus. We can cover those. So it can be hourly rate plus fringe benefits can all lump together for that activity hour, but there's some things that we can pay for along with those.
Good, and to that end, we had to create a form that shows which hours the officer is working, which hours were dedicated to enforcement, and which hours were not. So with that being said, what does this include? I mean, and this is something an agency really needs to think about. I'll be very candid. We had some folks that we've had long-standing relationships with that were not willing to continue their grants because of this. We hope that's not the case. We want to, but what can't we reimburse for? Hours that are not. What?
It's up on the court time.
Oh, okay. All right, we can pay for traffic safety court time. All right. So remember, we are paying a lot of states across the country. They do not have personnel grants. I'm going to still call it personnel grant for the purpose of this, but it is a personnel grant for which we will only reimburse for hours spent on traffic safety enforcement and education. Education okay to throw in there, Bill? The word education?
As far as the officer doing educational stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, there's a reason for that. It's okay, yes. A lot of folks, a lot of states, they don't do full-time, or well, we used to do full-time equivalent or FTE positions. They don't do it like this. They basically provide an agency with so much money for overtime, grants, a certain amount. We do a little bit of that. If it's something you think you're interested in, we do a little bit of that, but we are very restrictive on what we will allow. It has to be high visibility enforcement. We don't do traffic checkpoints on overtime because I think you get more bang for your buck riding around stopping cars than you do set up at a checkpoint. It's primarily for speeding and OP enforcement. We're going to come to you. We're going to ask you for copies of citations. We're going to ask you for CAD reports. If we feel like they're being brought in shagging calls. I mean, we understand that any cop on the street in uniform in a police car at any moment's notice could respond to something that has to be there to respond to an emergency. But as far as being a regular call taker for the purpose of enforcement grants, we can't have it. We can't allow it. So what can't we not reimburse for? Hours not spent on traffic enforcement. Any folks, that right there is going to include answering rec calls. Okay? We're talking about an enforcement position. We're not talking about typically a traffic position. They can't go out and shag rec calls. Pure and simple. Obviously, if they pull up on something, or it's a PI wreck and they're the closest ones there, by all means they need to go there and render aid and help how they can. Clear the road, do what they need to, but somebody else needs to come in and conduct the investigation. Any training specific to highway safety, this includes in-service firearms and so forth. Anything that is not traffic safety specific. We cannot pay for leave, all right? Holiday, vacation, comp time, sick time, so forth. Holidays not work, typically you'll get an RDO, or you'll get your day back. If you're off on a holiday, we can't pay for that. And then again, court time not related to traffic enforcement. Okay, so are there any questions from any of our law enforcement partners or any municipality representation, county or local, in the room, that if you have a question, by all means? I'm sure somebody else probably got the same question. Yes, sir.
So if it's not a personnel grant, but if it's an overtime grant, does the same rules apply as far as what's reimbursed, what not reimbursed?
It's actually the rules that were kind of standard with an overtime grant. We're going to tell you, basically, we're going to tell you what we expect from you. It's got to stretch out over the course of, say, a fiscal year. So you're not going to work everything in 1 month with 4 or 5 officers. We're going to ask you to kind of spread it out over the course of the grant year, so many hours a week. I don't believe personally in allowing a cop to take off to be able to work an overtime assignment, because then your net is kind of, you're losing the cop on the street that would be doing things and letting him work for overtime. I think there's some issues with that. So it's a good thing to be able to do. We hadn't done it much in the past, and I'll be very honest with you why. Typically, when fraud appears when you have fraud in grants, in these types of grants that we offer for police officers, for enforcement, it's going to appear with overtime grants more than anything else. Yes, sir.
I would just say that the few times we've done it, the reporting expectations are pretty high, and we've had mixed success with that. But as Stacy says, we've only done it for a few.
Look, we've had some grants. We've had some grantees get an overtime grant where we couldn't provide a full-time position, a grant for a full-time position during that fiscal year. We've had some that did such a good job with it. Well, I see, such a good job with it, they were awarded a grant the following year. All right, and we've had some where we've called them up and said, hey, Officer Smuckatelli there that you had working the other night for 4 hours and stopped 2 cars, we don't want him working it no more. Yes, sir.
And the other thing I'd say, for those of you who are non-law enforcement in the room, I know you're like, is this really fit for me? We're going to talk a lot about law enforcement and law enforcement specific grants and needs in this training, because law enforcement is a key part of who we work with. That is not to say that those of you who are not law enforcement, we don't love you and need you. We do, but there's just some very specific stuff on that. So please indulge us as we go through some of this that is law enforcement specific.
All righty. So as we told you, the grant application process is going to open January 1st. Just be very mindful when you go in there, and I'll show you a little bit about this later, that you're looking at the application. I don't think, hopefully you won't have more than one option. In the past, we have had to go in, and this will make sense this afternoon, we've had to go in and open up a portion of the grant process from previous years about the same time that a new grantee wants to file a grant, and they'll open it up and file it under the wrong fiscal year. So I'm going to show you on here, I hope I'll be able to show you on here, make sure you're getting the application process for the 2021 fiscal year. Mark covered very well the fact that we're data driven. We have to, we have wanted to focus efforts in counties where we don't have a footprint. But we're a lot of times we're unable to. There are parts of the state where we're unable to, we don't have projects. We don't have partnerships like we would like to have. But at the same time, they're in the lower echelon of fatality statistics. You know, if I get anybody here from the western part of the state? Okay, well, yeah, from Matthews there, but a little bit further north and a little bit further west, Watauga County. We don't have a whole lot going on in Watauga County. Would love to, but when the police chief calls and wants to know what he needs to do to get a grant, I have to be very candid with him. You're ranked in the 70s or maybe the 80s in fatality statistics. It's a good problem to have, you know? It's a good problem to have. That's what we have to look at when we're going through and evaluate. We're not going to tell you not to put in for a grant. Absolutely not. I will tell you right now, you get 100% of everything you don't ask for, and that's the only guarantee that we can give anybody coming out of the room today. It's divided into sections. The first section, Section A, has basically the general information that we're going to need for you to be able to your contact information, and then some information that's required by the federal government. We need your agency name, the address, an agency, organization, nonprofit, whatever that may be. Contact information. I can't stress this enough. Please make sure that whoever the contact number is listed, you include their name, their email address, their work phone number, and please, we would also ask for a cell number as well. You're going to need identifying information specific to your agency. The tax ID, your DUNS number, the county and type of agency you are. New or continuation. If it's a new grant, it's a new grant. If it's the second year of a grant, it's a continuation grant. And then there will be the numbers that correspond with that. I tell you what, let's go to this right here. Let's look at this. All right, so you've got, that's where I'm talking about right here, new, continuation, and then what year you are, either 1, 2, 3, or 4 or more. Agency information, federal information you need over there, federal tax ID, DUNS number. I think I will actually, just real quick, DUNS number is your data universal numbering system. It's used to identify all types of business organizations, including government contractors. If you can go online and get your DUNS number if you don't know what it is, but I'll promise you, whoever's doing your finances, they know what your DUNS number is. Type of agency you are, allocation of funding. You'll see this afternoon what you're going to be able to populate right here is the local share, if I remember correctly. So once you put in 15%, then it's going to automatically populate the federal share to 85%. If you're a nonprofit, if you're a county or a state agency that's seeking 100% funding for something, or you're looking for a DWI person, when you put 0 in here, it's going to automatically populate to 100%. And then you're going to put in your project title. Let me see. Make sure I cover everything. Okay, the budget, as you see right there, you're not going to be able to put anything into these fields right here. Later on in the grant application, it's broken down into sections between personnel costs, which are broken down again into salary and fringe or salary and benefits. There are contractual services. There are commodities, which provides me with a lot of confusion. How it is. Other direct costs, which will include equipment. If you have indirect costs, those are in there. And once you start going through and populating those line items later in the grant, which it's going to make a little more sense here in a second, those things will automatically populate. All right. If you have a federal, if you're going to be, let's say you're at 85-15, you're getting a personnel grant or you're getting an enforcement grant that's 85 federal, 15. Where's the rest of the money coming from? All right. Typically, it's from the agency or from the municipality's general fund. But if you have for other entities, nonprofits or county agencies or anything like that, if you're providing other positions or you're able to show that you're providing any type of match, we want to see it right there. We actually made this a required section. If you're not providing any kind of match or there is no match or you're not providing any funding for this, then you have to at very least put NA in that blank. Somebody have a question? All right, so let's see what else we got. All right, now we're going to get into section B. All right, right after that last section, you had this. What is the statement of problem? All right, begin with a problem statement. I did a very brief one for a police department in the demonstration we're going to have this afternoon. I have read not enough, and I have read way too much in these. Some people are Shakespearean. Some people you could tell like to write, like just going from one end of the spectrum to the next. It's my 18-year-old son can't stand writing his name, and but we're not English professors. We don't profess to be English professors. You're not being judged or anything like that, but just to the greatest describe what your problem is. What are you looking to? What problem do you have in your area, in your jurisdiction, in your county? What are you looking to? What are you looking to combat? What are you looking to solve? And it's different for everybody. Municipalities, law enforcement agencies, county health departments, state government agencies, courts, universities, nonprofits. Once you state what your problem is, we want to know what is your proposal? What are you proposing to do about it? What are you asking us to pay for? What is your solution to it? How are you going to solve that problem? How are you going to reduce fatalities and serious injury crashes? It belongs in there. If you have specific or unusual or requests for equipment, we want to know what that is and what it's going to be used for right here. You need to justify that purchase right here. Okay? If you're going to be traveling, which there are line items within the grant application when we get to the budget in a minute, a little more in depth into the budget. We want to know about travel, especially out-of-state travel. You're going to have to justify where you're going. Typically, everybody in the room probably can justify going to the Lifesavers Conference or maybe the Governor's Highway Safety Association Conference. If you're here from an agency or you're here from a lab, from like a DWI lab or for something like that, you're going to the Borkenstein. We need to know about it right here. If you put travel money in your grant application, meaning when we come up, there's money there that says under other direct cost, say $2,500 for in-state travel, $5,000 for out-of-state travel. We want to know what it is in your narrative. Be specific about it. Yes, sir.
And one thing that we can't find, that we're not gonna fund is if you have a grant and you say the solution is to buy this piece of equipment. We're not gonna just fund an equipment grant. Now, if you've got an overall project in which you need equipment to help accomplish the goals of that project, and assuming it's allowable, we'd be interested in doing that. But, you know, I need to buy a nice, I don't know, DWI simulator is not by itself a project. So we need to be careful to remember that.
That's a very good point. We have agencies, and I'm not just focusing, you know, from a law enforcement standpoint, equipment that's justifiable is going to include a radar or a LiDAR. What we're allowed to pay for is a car, or whatever percentage, you know, the grant covers. An MDT or MCT, in-car camera. Will not pay for body cameras. Feds will not, we will not pay for any part of a body camera, but we do fund simulators. We do, you justify it in this portion, in the written narrative part of the application.
Tag readers.
I'm sorry? No. Mm-mm. No tag readers, no, we do radar signs now though, don't we? We didn't do those for a while. Yeah. Not to fix wheel. Look, again, we don't do just equipment grants. They don't exist. So just Mark, that is an excellent point. I'm glad he made. We cannot and we will not just fund a grant for a piece of equipment. Yes, sir.
So, question, as far as, you know, if we're trying to fund a traffic officer spot, would a vehicle fall under the cost of the government, the 2CF?
No, we're still able to do, so let's say it's at 85-15, 85%. We'll fund 85% of that vehicle and upfit of the vehicle, that lights, sirens, and so forth, up to $35,000.
Okay.
So we'd pay for, you can put up to 35 grand in it and we'll cover 85% of those costs. Anything else? It'll be a little bit clearer this afternoon when we go through when we go through it there. All right, so there is some information specific to LEOs that we need to have. Law enforcement agency information. We want to know how big your agency is. We want to know how many, you know, a 1 or 2 man police department. I'll be honest with you, if they get a position through a grant funded position, I think it's going to be a true challenge for a smaller agency like that to dedicate 100% of their efforts to traffic safety. We want to know how big your agency is. We want to know what kind of, what your citation reporting is for the last 3 years for not only, I think we get up for speeding, for, where are my notes? We get it for speeding, we get it for OP, for seatbelt violations and DWIs. David, I apologize, man. You had something a while ago and I completely forgot to go back to you.
It's nothing. I was just going to reiterate about the overtime. The reason we didn't do the officers working at the same time as the hours, because there can be a conflict. He can be scheduled to work, take off 4 hours. And sometimes that timekeeping doesn't cohesion. And that's the problem we've seen with fraud.
Yep. Save them from themselves.
It may not be anything intentional, without saying more, but that's where the problems arise. When the officer's scheduled for 8 hours, he takes off 4, he goes work 4 hours overtime, but he still gets paid for the 8 hours. Somehow they have a timekeeping problem, maybe some miscommunication between him or her and the department, and they get paid for the 8 hours regular pay, and then they get paid for the 4 hours overtime. That's the reason we're going to do it on the day off. That's
very true. Okay, so here you're going to populate this. Obviously, if you're not a law enforcement agency, this is not applicable to you. Okay, the first couple of sections here, we want to know how many tickets you wrote in the last the last 3 years, your agency can provide that. We want to know whether you have the number of sworn officers you have, and then we want to know, do you have dedicated traffic positions right now, DWI or traffic positions, and how many officers are assigned to them. Remember, every one of the personnel positions that we've been talking about today, you can't, these are new positions. If, Chief, how many cops does your agency have? 64. If we award a grant to Matthews Police Department, then he becomes a 65-man police department, okay? And then you're gonna put in, everybody can do this. Again, the most recent fatality information that we have access to will be available on the GHSP website. That's where you're gonna get this. We wanna know what your fatality rankings are, your overall alcohol, unrestrained, and speed. And then let's say that you're looking to do, you're in Cabarrus County and you're wanting to do a pedestrian safety grant, so you're gonna use Cabarrus County numbers. You may want to specify what the pedestrian numbers are right there in that section. Just let us know what it is. Okay, once we get through this, you're going to get into your goals and objectives for the grant. And they're listed out. You can have as many goals and objectives as you want to, but they just have to be measurable. You can't say something, like we want to reduce traffic fatalities. We want to know what you plan on doing specific, what's measurable. SMART goals. Specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, time-specific. I don't care what your agency is in here or what you're here, whether you're a health organization or you're a police department or a fire department or anything else. We all share one common goal of reducing fatalities in the state of North Carolina. Okay? Or in your county. So in Wake County, if there are the 5-year average is, I don't know, 25 fatalities or 50 fatalities, and I'm a Wake County agency. I might be a healthcare organization. I want to reduce fatalities, the 2014 to 2015 average of 50 fatalities I want to reduce it by, say, 10% to 45 fatalities during the fiscal year during my grant. Now, that's a little unclear. In the book you have right there, and we will go over it a little bit more this afternoon, there are examples of SMART goals in there depending on what your project is. And if you want help creating a goal or the objectives that go with it, then we will certainly we're available to do that. You just call us and you tell us what you're looking to do, and we'll help you come up with a goal, and we'll help you come up with objectives for that. A lot of what we send grants back for is to make sure that they're measurable. That's what you're going to be rated on, or what you're going to be evaluated on at the end of your grant year. If you're awarded a grant and you said you're going to reduce OP, occupant protection or unrestrained fatalities by 10%, at the end of the year, we look at that and we say, okay, they said they were going to reduce it by 10. It went from this to this. Did they do it or not? Doesn't mean you're not going to get a grant the following year. As long as you did everything you're supposed to do, we're going to continue our efforts with you to get to those goals. Your objectives need to be measurable. If your goal is to reduce fatalities, DWI fatalities, it's like we talked about a little bit earlier. The objective there is to write more tickets or arrest more people and get them off the street. It could be also education classes. It could be if you're a DWI court, it could be the number of people that you successfully graduate. Again, a DWI court. Your goal is to reduce DWI impaired driving fatalities. All right. Your objectives may be to get so many people or get so many more people into DWI court in an effort to cut down on recidivism and the overall DWI rate. Okay? I've been here about 3 years now. It was hard for me to wrap my brain around these when I first came in there and they were telling me what a SMART goal was. but I kind of get it. I think that there's a KISS method to this. Keep it simple, okay? Apply your goal. I would encourage you. That don't mean that's the only way to do it. It has to be measurable. I would encourage you, as much as you can, keep it focused on fatalities, the number of fatalities you're dealing with in your area. And then what are the objectives, measurable, that will apply to that goal and help us reduce whatever the fatality was, the fatality classification that you're using. That's what it's going to look like. And again, you can have more than one objective. Each goal is listed out specifically. You can have more than one objective there. All right, this is going to change. This is a quick section they put in the application several years ago. It's going to look a little bit different, but we want you to talk about what, GHSP, we have goals listed in our highway safety plan. We have goals listed that coincide with the state's strategic highway safety plan, and then there were some added that are a little bit different in the application. What does our stuff want to look like 5 years down the road? We're going to bring those a little more in line with what's in our highway safety plan the application for grant funds that we apply to NHTSA. This is going to look a little bit different this year. Every one of you, no matter what your entity is, what your background is, what you're doing, what kind of grant you're applying for, we're all interested in reducing traffic-related fatalities. But if yours is related to DWI, then you want to also you also want to check the goal that's related to impaired driving. If you're a traffic enforcement officer, you want to collect anything that is related to traffic enforcement. If it's OP related, you want to get the seatbelt rate up by, I still say that the more tickets you write, the more they think you're going to write tickets, the more apt folks are to put their seatbelt on. But I don't know. This is going to look a little bit different, but you're still going to go in and select the goal that is that's applicable to your grant. A lot of times that section gets kind of left off, but we'll see. All right, let me show you. We're going to talk about budget detail. Now here's where everything you put in here in section C in the budget, and hold on, that's what it looks like. You're going to put salary, and then whatever the salary is. Whatever salaries we're paying for, whether it's a court officer or it's a cop or whatever it is, just remember it's probably, unless it's a brand new position, you're probably not talking entry level, especially law enforcement. Make sure you take something along the mid-range point or we're going to have to go back and make some changes. Fringe benefits, I don't care if it's one position or 5 positions. Okay, if your fringe rate is 20% of 50,000 bucks, what is that? Somebody do the math. Is that 20 or 10? Whatever it is, $10,000. If it's 5 officers, then group it together. Okay, just put fringe costs per officer, but you can group all that together. If you were looking to subcontract, we have some grantees that will sub out some of their efforts. Let me see, for instance, the Department of Transportation that does our Watch For Me grant, that oversees the Watch For Me grant, partners with the Highway Safety Research folks in Chapel Hill, HSRC, to maintain a Watch For Me website and to further Watch For Me efforts, pedestrian safety efforts. It's a contract. It's a contract they have. All right, that's where that would go in there. Commodity stuff you use every day, office supplies, stuff like that. And look, while I'm thinking about it, if you have any questions about whether we can or can't pay for it, make a phone call first. During the if you're awarded a grant, during the application process, we're going to pour through it, and we'll call you back and say, hey, we can't pay for flashlights, cops. We can't General cost of doing government. We can't pay for flashlights, so you need to take that off your grant. I think up until this year, we actually had, when you drop down, you'll see this afternoon, there's like a drop down section with equipment in it, especially for law enforcement. Hopefully traffic vests and flashlights, and there's one other one I had, uniforms I had removed, so you don't even have that option anymore. And then equipment, there's a couple of different equipment sections. You're going to see that for cost over $5,000 or less than $5,000, and then there's your travel, in-state travel and out-of-state travel. And then is there an entity in the room that will be asking for indirect costs associated with in a grant application? Okay, then you are more than familiar with indirect costs and what we require. If you don't have an established rate with the federal government, then it's a 10% de minimis rate.
I do have a question about the personnel. Is there a max limit of how many people you can put in the budget?
You get one, remember, if you leave here with anything else, I can only guarantee you will get 100% of everything you don't ask for. We might have an agency ask for 5 cops, and we might say we can't fund 5 cops, we can fund 1 cop. Or is there a limit on the number of people you can ask for from a personnel standpoint?
I mean, like entering into the application, so like a number of lines that can be entered in the application.
Actually, there are. There are, and what we get from a lot of times where that applies is on some of our research grants that we have with HSRC. Oh, are you? Okay. Well, because you've got all kinds of titles at different rates and everything else, but I don't know that a lot of times they wind up going in and trying to group them. If you encounter that specific problem, then we'll see what we can do to, we'll work with you to group some stuff together. Maybe we've got to go back and maybe list something in the narrative to kind of explain what we're doing in the budget detail part. Okay? All right, at the end of the grant, you're going to have a quarterly task. For law enforcement folks, it is, you'll see this afternoon, well, law enforcement, there are actually some that are listed that you're going to check. I'll show you on the next slide. So first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. You're going to list what task you're going to be accomplishing every quarter. For law enforcement, it's the same thing every quarter. If you're traveling to a Lifesavers conference in March, then you include that in that quarter. If you are doing, if you're teaching classes, whatever the goal of your grant is, you're gonna list it or what you're gonna be doing to accomplish that goal. You're gonna put it in the quarters. Include your plans or intentions for each quarter, understanding you will be providing quarterly reports addressing each task listed in there. For reporting purposes, every quarter you're going to do what we call a quarterly report, and you're going to submit it to your grant specialist, save it in the system, whatever you've got to sign it. They'll sign that they reviewed it, and then you're going to for each quarter, and then at the end of the grant, after the fourth quarter, you're going to do a final accomplishment report where you're going to talk about what you did how you did on your goals and objectives. So what does this look like? Okay, conditions for enforcement projects only. See all of these? All of these right here are each one of these should appear for a law enforcement agency in each of the quarterly tasks, plus any travel you do or anything else you say you're going to do on a quarterly basis. If you're a law enforcement agency, you check right there, and then all of these will be included in each of your quarterly tasks, plus anything else you want to do. Dave, you or Bob want anything here? I know we've gone over this quickly. I think we're going to be breaking for lunch here in just a second. me see where I am because I got a little bit more to go. All right, so let's say you've got your grant application all typed up and it looks, you've done okay. Once you've completed the application, you're going to hit submit, okay? We receive it. Deidre sitting down here will pin and accept it electronically. And then you will receive an application accepted letter. You're not yet approved for a grant at this stage in the process. That's going to be a common refrain here over the course of the next 4 or 5 slides, okay? Understand something, where we are in the process right here, you're probably, Mark kind of went over the timeline. We accept the applications in January. I spend the next month reading them and sending them out to all our claims. All applications are assigned to a specialist to try to get them about halfway right, where we can review them. We're going to review we will discuss as a team every single grant application we receive over the course of March, April, and probably into May. We will start making determinations on what's going to be approved or not in the system then. And then once we've done that, then you're going to start getting, when we start accepting these applications, you're going to start getting email correspondence. Do they come in email or just in the grant system? They come in email too, based on the email address you put in there. You're not approved at this process. We file a highway safety plan that's due to NHTSA at the end of June, by July 1st every year. We are not even in a position to say any grants approved prior to that until NHTSA tells us they have approved our highway safety plan. So, and what we plan on doing with their money and the programs that we're going to be financing, that's what and it's a whole lot more complicated than that, but that is basically what we're putting in our highway safety plan. All right, you're going to get a letter that looks like this. All this means right here is we got you and you're moving on to the next stage of the process. Okay, once you receive the application accepted letter, you're going to begin the PIN process. You'll log into the system and open your saved application. This is going to make a whole lot more sense when I get online today and kind of show you some stuff about I don't think I'm going to be able to go in and pin it like you're going to be required to do if you've made it to this point. But you're still going to have to know how to do this. This is part of the process that we'll be working through in the latter part of the summer. And you're going to accept terms that you're going to enter the PIN number that you entered on. You remember the grant access authorization form, select validate and hit submit. We get that back, we've got to fund it. We've got to figure out what kind of money we're able to use to fund the application or the process that, or the grant that you're applying for. If it's, and when I say that, Mark talked earlier about 402 funding, which we can use for a lot of different things. And then we've also got incentive funding that is a bit more restrictive on what we can fund with those types of grant funds. All right, here you're going to receive a second letter. Once we fund it, once Deidre goes in and does what she does, our finance folks, you're going to receive a second letter that says your application has been approved again, and you're going to proceed to the next stage. Again, not a final approval. That's what that letter looks like. All right. So while we're going through these processes, whatever highway safety specialist you've been working with, if you're putting in for something that's related to impaired driving, you're probably going to be dealing with David Williams. If you're putting in for something that's has to do with bike and ped, or you're looking for something to do with occupant protection, unrestrained seatbelt stuff. You're probably going to be dealing with Kevin Buster. If it's motorcycle safety, if it's some enforcement grants, you're probably going to be dealing with Bob. And depending on how quickly we can get some, we've actually got a process right now. We've actually got people putting in to take over as our traffic records coordinator. But in the meantime, when these applications start coming in, Warren will be helping trying to process and get through these things. But if you have a traffic records question, hell, even after we get somebody in, you're probably still going to be asking it of Warren. But you're going to be working with you the entire time to get the application where it needs to be. Now this includes, we're at a process right now where basically we've decided you're going to get a grant. We've got to work with you to get everything you're required you need to start the grant on October 1st. That includes the agreement of conditions. If your municipality is a local government resolution, which basically you're getting, say it's a $100,000 grant, we're funding 85% of it, you're providing the other 15%, that has to be approved by your local governing body, and we give you a form to fill out that they have to fill out. It has to have your county, city stamp on it, that basically that you agree to pay the other part of it. For nonprofits, not-for-profits, whatever you want to call yourselves, there's also a conflict of interest policy or no overdue taxes certification form that we're going to ask from you or ask you to give us. And we're not going to approve any agreement until these documents are properly completed and submitted. And if you don't have an agreement in place, we will not reimburse you for any expenditures, okay? For FY20. And it shames me to say it, no matter, I try to practice gentle pressure relentlessly applied. I think any parent you should, but out of the 90-something grants we've got this year, I've still got 2 agencies that don't have their paperwork in for this fiscal year that we're currently in. So it can be a challenge. Don't be that agency. Try to work with them, get them in as quickly as you can, please. All right, once an agreement is created, okay, you've gotten all your stuff in, Deidre's funded the grant, she's hit okay on it, it's sitting in my grant queue. I have an electronic, on my computer screen, I've got a queue of stuff there. I've made sure, your specialist has made sure that everything you're required to have is there. Then I'm gonna approve the agreement, and you're going to receive a grant notification letter, approval letter. Hopefully this happens sometime, through August and September. For the love, please, I'm begging. Don't go spend any money. I mean, you're hearing exactly from me what Mark said earlier. Please don't. We have had to say, no, we're not paying for that car. And if you don't think I won't call behind you and talk up the salesman at whatever place I think you spent money to see if I can get my hands on something that says you entered into an agreement prior to October 1st, yes, I will. I'm not, do not incur any cost until October 1st. I don't want to see anything with a quote on it. I don't want to see anything that would make it appear that you made a purchase prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. It's not, please, please, please. Well, I mean, you don't want to, I don't want to make that call. Bob's had to make it a couple times, with a lot of money. And I don't care what size agency or what your budget is, okay? Having to turn around and pay $30,000 for something is not, that's going to take it away from something else. You're not going to be able to buy something else because you got happy, I guess you can say. And it's not a fun call. It's not a decision that we take lightly to say we're not going to pay for something, but we don't have a choice here. All right, you're going to get a couple of letters here. Okay, this is, once an agreement is approved, you're gonna start getting letters. We're gonna require you to pin your grant, and then between the time when the agreement is created, you're getting all that paperwork in to your specialist and in the grant system, and then you're gonna get another letter. You get like, Sarah, I'm sorry, Sarah Carter, our contact with, she's our grant IT person, okay? And she came in to help us with these letters. Mark's done a lot. They used to be a lot more confusing, where it sounded like you were getting a letter in June or May that said, hey, you got a grant. We've tried to clear some of that stuff up. You're gonna get a litany of letters through the process. Please, if you have any questions, just let us know. Okay, really quickly. Again, the purpose of this is to get you through the application process. I think this afternoon is gonna help out a lot with that. If you're awarded a grant, there are considerations that you need to. There are things you need to consider. Look in the project guide, the project manager's guide book there, and it touches a lot more on claims for reimbursement, quarterly progress reports. That's part of our monitoring. That if you're a personnel grant, if we're paying for a position, one of these guys sitting on the back row over here is going to come visit you at least 2 times a year. All right, if we're buying equipment, we've got to see the equipment. If we're paying for enforcement hours, not necessarily positions anymore, we're going to come, well, you're already submitting time records or time sheets with them, but they may walk in there and say, okay, I need to see CAD history for a week. You know, we need to make sure that guy's not out answering, just shagging calls. We can't pay for it. If we feel like he's not, and a lot of times, if I'm paying, I don't mean to make it, it's not I'm not paying for anything, but if the government's paying for 10 hours a day of enforcement activity, and you know, we see on MEDs, you're giving us monthly enforcement reports. We see that dude stopping 3 or 4 cars in an 8 or 10 hour shift. We want to know what he's doing. But there's a lot of any out-of-state travel, even though it's in your grant, you still have to submit a out-of-state travel request. It has to be approved first, okay? If you decide you want to move some money, you've got some, you're not going to be able to take that trip, but there's some commodities, or there's something you need to move money from one line item to the next, from one section to the next. That's done with what we call a change request. It's a budget revision. Depending on how much money you're moving and how that affects your program, it may require even, I can't approve that. I have to still send that to NHTSA for approval. PMRs, project management reviews, that's where they're coming to see you. They're not, it's not a pop quiz, okay? They're not just going to show up. None of us are going to show up unannounced. We're going to make sure that you know we're coming and you can accommodate us. And then at the end of the grant year, you've got a certain amount of time before you to be able to submit a final accomplishment report and get your final claim in. As far as claims go, we won't accept them more than once a month. We want you to file them at least quarterly. Even though I stand up here and say that, there are some people that are probably sitting in this room that could potentially be awarded a grant, and we'll be lucky to get, you know, it'll go 6 or 7 months and then they'll file a claim. It's easier to keep up with for y'all if you file them on a regular basis.
A few words from the 30,000 foot level, which is where I was about 3 hours ago on a plane coming in. Some of the basic general stuff about the grants. First of all, where I came from, I was a law enforcement officer for 21 years in Baltimore, and I ran the highway safety grant for that department, so I know exactly where you are and what you're trying to do. Paperwork is a real fun thing in grants. Luckily, the online grant system in North Carolina is pretty good. I picked it up pretty quickly, and I've been jumping in and out before. So it's pretty easy to navigate. North Carolina is one of the only states that has an online system. There's not a whole lot of states that do. My other state is Virginia, that I oversee, and they have a completely paper-based system. So when I go into their office, there's 300 files that I have to look at. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's been 19 years, and I have 2 states, the occupant protection and CPS coordinator, along with the financial situation in the office. Basically, the basic grant stuff is just basic common sense. Think of it as your money. Would you buy what you're asking to buy with your own money? 1, is it necessary for what I'm asking for? 2, is it reasonable? And 3, is it allocable to the grant that I'm applying for? If I'm applying for a CPS grant or a law enforcement grant, in occupant protection, I'm not going to be asking for the fair driving stuff. So, be allocable to the different grant that you're asking for. The other thing is, look at your problem. If you have the problem, how are you going to fix it? What do I need to fix it? And start building your grant application that way to see how you're going to build that application. What you can do to help the Highway Safety Office meet their goals and objectives in their highway safety plan. You should always be referring back to that highway safety plan somehow, because that's the ultimate goal, is to save lives and reduce serious injuries. So, with that in mind, use your common sense and say, would I be paying for this if I wanted somebody to do that for me? I always say, and I quote this, I used to work in West Virginia quite a bit, and the director there at the Highway Safety Office always told me that I'm giving out grants to law enforcement and others to do a job, and I expect that job to be done. And he put in an analogy of, I'm paying you to cut grass, I expect you to cut the grass. If you're not going to cut the grass, I'll get somebody to cut the grass for me. Now he's actually asking for the grass clippings because he wants to see what exactly is going on out there. So he's getting a little bit more detailed as well. I monitor just like the Highway Safety Office monitors. I look at their files, and they look at your files. So everybody's looking at all this stuff because they want to see what federal monies are going to. So that's what the federal dollars accountability is. Is they want to look to see what's going on with the money. We get a lot of questions from Congress, where our money's going. Just got one actually asked how much money is going to law enforcement, because we realize they're a big part of our grant program, high visibility enforcement. However, we can't arrest and write tickets out of these problems. We can't do it all with just law enforcement. Law enforcement is the only ones in this room that can do what they do. Okay, nonprofits, universities, they can't go out and write tickets and arrest drunk drivers. We need the other folks. We need the nonprofits. We need the state agencies. We need the local communities to get involved because they need to support the law enforcement efforts as well. They are better at getting out into the public and getting that word out, getting that partnership formed to make sure that these programs flourish. Again, we can't arrest and write citations out of these problems. We need everybody playing together, everybody getting that message out there to know that this is a problem. Over 30,000 people are dying on the highways. That's why we need everybody. It's non-discriminatory. It affects everybody. So we need everybody to play. Community associations, critter clubs, lions, moose, the elks, things like that. They have very big bases that they can have together. They have a lot of contacts. Sometimes they have money that can help supplement your grants. Okay, so there's a lot of the private industries out there. Some states actually have corporate outreach people in their highway safety office to reach out to the corporations that are in their states and in their areas to help them with their highway safety issues, because that is a target audience there. Okay, if you're having an industrial area, you have some type of manufacturing plant, what a target-rich environment for highway safety, because there's a lot of people out there drive back and forth to work, sometimes not in the best of shapes of vehicles. So seek out as many partners as you can. If you're thinking about a grant and you can work with somebody else that might help you along with that grant, bring them on board. Let them help you. Let them give you the information you need, or they might have contacts that you can use. So it's not just law enforcement, It's nonprofits, it's state universities, it's state agencies. State agencies are a key because there's a lot of data in there that we need. There's a lot of people that we need to work with. The courts need to be involved because whatever law enforcement does out there, the courts are going to be involved. We need lab, toxicology, medical, fire department, because they're all first responders. They're all feeding into this system. So we need everybody to start participating. And if there's something in this grant system that you see that you need, give them a call and say, listen, I got this idea. Run the idea past them. If they think it's a good idea, who knows, they might issue the grant, they might give you some seed money to get started, see how it goes, evaluate it a little bit later. It might have to be changed, you might have to keep going, you might see something that is running really great, and you might share with our other states. So don't be afraid to start putting something in. If you have an idea, run it past the Highway Safety Office, and they'll give it a go and see what happens. Okay? All righty, thanks.
I'm going to see if we can get into the grant system. It can be a little bit tricky working off an air card for this, but I think we'll be okay. What you have up here, this is what you, when you go into the grant system, I can back out of this. You're going to set up a username and password, but this is what you're going to get. All right, so let's see if it'll let us in. Okay. I'm sorry, I got to find my notes. This is your home page. Sarah, if I say anything wrong, please please correct me over there. I have done this exactly one time, okay? And it worked, and I was kind of happy and proud of myself. But this is what you're going to get right here. All right, when y'all go in, if everybody in here decides they're going to, you're going to submit your grant authorization form, you're going to get access to the grant, and then when you get signed on to the grant system and you pull it up, this is what you've got. And we're going to look at new application. All right, this is a screen you get. You hit search. All right, this is a good example of what I was talking about earlier. I don't know why 2016 shows up here, but it's helpful to do that. We are going to apply for the purpose of this for a 2020 grant. All right, yours is going to say come January 1st, 2021. Deidre's going to go into the system and she's going to set it up where at whatever time on January 1st, for those of you eager beavers, you're going to be going into the system even though most of us are at home on New Year's Day, and you want to go ahead and be the first one to get your grant application in. This is what you're going to be looking for right here. So GHSP grant application. Come on, please. Hey, look at here. Okay, some of this is kind of pre-populated, but we're going to still go through what we need to go through right here. Yes, ma'am.
At this point, if there's anything wrong, if you're a brand new user particularly, if there's anything wrong about any of that pre-populated information, let us know before you save it, before you start it.
So this is pre-populated by you guys based on what's in the grant authorization form. See, you learn something new every day. All right, I didn't realize that. I thought that somebody had gone in and saved something. That's why when you fill that form out, you're going to want to make sure that everything is correct on there. So we're going to say we're with the Roanoke Rapids Police Department. Andy Bryant is our contact person. There's his contact information, and we're going to want to put a physical address on the we're going to want to put a physical address here. You got to fill it in. See that red mark, that little red star? If you don't fill it, those are required fields. If you don't fill those in right there, then you're going to get kicked. It's not going to let you save it or even submit it, I think, at the end. So we're in 123 Main Street. Roanoke Rapids, and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, or 27.
Can you tell them why we want the physical address instead of the post office box? Because when we do on-site visits, and we want to come to your location, they want to put the GPS in, that's what we want to see. You know, we don't know what the post office box is. We want to see the physical address there.
Okay, your DUNS number is at, what I say, is it 8 or 9 numbers?
Where does that number come from again, sir?
Okay, I can give you the address. It's if you go to www.dnb.com, there's a lookup there for your DUNS number. But I promise you, if you go to like Scotland County Finance Department, they're going to know what the county's DUNS number is. All right, so we're going to put in a DUNS number. Roanoke Rapids is located, I believe, Halifax County. Is that right? Kevin, anybody?
That's right.
Anybody from Roanoke Rapids in here? Good, because we're going to make up a bunch of bad stuff about you. All right, and this is Roanoke Rapids is a municipality. You got to check this. And we're going to say, for the purpose of this, I think I set it up as a new project. Look, y'all don't have to stand up here. The only thing worse than sitting up here listening to me stutter and stammer my way through a presentation, it would probably be sitting up here watching me type a 3 or 4 page grant application. It's not going to happen. We're going to be doing some cutting and pasting. And while I'm on the subject of that, I would encourage everybody in here. You do your problem statement, you do your narrative, you do your goals and your objectives and anything else. Do it on a Word document and then cut and paste it into this, okay? It'll help you. It helps me. We're going to say it's a continuation grant, and it's the 2nd year. Actually, how did I set this up? Actually, we're going to say it's a new project, 1st year. So that makes, it's going to be for a traffic enforcement officer, I think is how I wrote it. So that means that the percentage that the agency has to provide is what? Anybody remember? 15%, that's correct. So, and that should hopefully, see it populates right away, the 85 to the 15. Okay, so, let's see, we'll call this Roanoke Rapids Traffic Enforcement Initiative. Okay, that's what we're going to call it. Remember, we don't fill any of this in. It will not let me click in any of these areas right here. This because it will populate once, it will populate when we go back in and do the budget here in a few minutes. Specify how the non-federal share will be provided. If there is no non-federal share, then if you've got some match that you can put in there, then by all means put in there what you can. For the purpose of this grant right here, if you're not given anything, if you're a nonprofit or you're starting a program and it's 100% federally funded through this grant, then you still have to put in there NA. Again, it's going to kick you back out. We made that a mandatory field. We needed something typed in there, but for the purpose of this, we're just going to say the is it the city or town of Roanoke Rapids? City? The city of Roanoke Rapids will provide the non-federal share through its, I don't know, general fund. Or you can just put general fund balance. All right. This right here, project number, CFDA number, and work type. That is something that once an agreement is made or once the application is approved, that's something I'll go back in, open up the grant. There are certain fields that I can go in and populate something to, and it really is, actually it's only these. I can't go in and make changes to your grant. We can't go in and make changes to your grant. And I'll tell you the beauty of this grant system right here. Once something goes in and it's saved, it is there forever. You can't take, if you attach something to the grant, like a document, you know, when you go in and file your claim, you're going to provide backup documentation to back up those expenditures that you've already spent your money on. Once it's there, if you inadvertently save it, it's always there, which is fine. If you save something it was incorrect, you put the wrong document in there, maybe you put something in there you shouldn't have, it goes with another grant. That's fine, but it's still there. I can't change anything, I can't do anything to your grant application except provide a project number, which is specific to the type of the program area and the type of funding that we're going to provide you, whether it's 402 or incentive funding. The CFDA number and the work type. The work type is something specific for me that so I know where your grant, basically where it fits, what planned activity I assigned your grant to. All right, so now we're good, and so nothing will go there right this second. And then lo and behold, here we have our problem statement.
Just down below it.
It is. See, thank you. Bless you. All right, I did a Word document. Okay, so let's just take a look at this. This is very, very, very elementary. Basically, we're going to ask for a little bit more than that. I'm giving you a little background on Roanoke Rapids, located in Halifax County, northern Piedmont section of North Carolina near the Virginia border. Most recent census estimated a population of so-and-so. Interstate 95 traverses through Roanoke Rapids. One of the primary responsibilities of the Roanoke Rapids Police Department is to conduct traffic enforcement within the city limits, including Interstate 95. Due to the higher speed limits often associated with interstate travel, traffic crashes on these types of roadways are often more severe. The end result of these high-speed crashes is often serious injury or death. In the 5-year period between 2014 and 2018, Halifax County ranked 43rd in overall fatalities, 38 in speed fatalities, and 35 in unrestrained fatalities. Okay, because the town that I was pulled up was on the was Roanoke Rapids, in the sandbox, in what they gave me to play with here and provide a demonstration. That's what I used, and those were the rankings that I had pulled up a while ago, and that's what I went to. I simply you're restating your case here. Now I'm going to tell you what we can't see and what we're going to ask you to take out if we see it in a grant application, if we see it in the narrative. If it says something along the lines of, we ain't got time to do traffic enforcement anymore. We don't have time to provide this type of counseling. We don't have time to do, or we don't have the manpower. You got to be very careful about how you state these things. Remember, there's a general cost of doing government, and if it is a service that is typically provided by the government, then we can't come back in and start doing it we can't come in and replace that effort. These are extraneous efforts, okay? This is dedicated traffic enforcement. That's why your agency grows when you do it. All right, so there's our problem. You know, we've got, we're ranked in overall fatalities and speed fatalities and unrestrained fatalities. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you right now, This says 43, 38, and 35. If we get this application in based on those fatality rankings, we are going to be deeply challenged to be able to fund this grant because of the rankings where they are. We are typically, and in most cases, what we've been able to fund in the past is something in the top 25. Throwing it all out there for you, it's a challenge to, because why? And why is that? And, you know, somewhat because we are data driven.
It's gonna affect the most people.
Huh?
It's gonna affect the most people.
It's going to affect the most people. It's going to make the highest, you know, it's going to make a bigger impact.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
when you say top 25, are you looking at top 25 in overall fatalities or like across all three?
Well, I tell you, and I'm not putting this on Bill or NHTSA. We'll look at all of it. We'll look at any ranking you give us with the data that we have. There will be some cases where we have something, maybe it's in the upper 20s, but maybe they have a specific pedestrian problem where they're ranked in the top 20, or they've got a speed problem where they are ranked in the top 20. And you want to, that needs to be the problem that you want to specifically address. Okay? You have something?
No, I was just going to make that same point that you just made. And let's say this data may not show that you're in that top 25. And top 25 is not a cutoff point. It's just, you know, we're telling you what we've done in the past.
Exactly.
And you showed that, you know, in pedestrian deaths, you're in the top 15. And you've got an interesting and replicable idea around pedestrian traffic deaths. And in pedestrian traffic deaths, you're in the top 15. We would be interested.
I'll give you a good example. Coastal towns up and down the East Coast, especially in the Outer Banks, have some unique challenges during the summer months. I mean, obviously their towns grow exponentially in terms of with vacationers coming in and everything else. Likewise, a college town, especially a small college town, their population grows exponentially. I know that in Raleigh, between August and I don't know, May, West Raleigh grows by 35 to 50,000 people. It's a challenge for that district commander over there. It creates problems, especially in overall traffic issues, but specifically pedestrian traffic in both those coastal towns and also on in college towns. Now, going back to, say, the Outer Banks, they're never going to rank highly in overall fatalities, but they do have problems with bicycle and pedestrian fatalities in the summer months, and I think that they could produce, a coastal town could probably give us an application for a grant focusing on pedestrian and bicycle safety that would merit serious consideration for us, GHSP, and for NHTSA in terms of, you know, if you give us a good plan. Tell us what tell us what your problem is and tell us how you hope to solve it, and make us consider those things. Yes, Bill?
Also might not be in the top 25 or close to it, but you may border a top 25 county or an area, like 15 and 10, and if you do that, your community may affect those numbers as well, because they may be a bedroom community for that county.
That is a very good point. Thank you. All right. So, I mean, it's not a hard, there's no hard, fast rule here, but we just to tell you what we're looking at, or what we're trying to consider when we're sitting in that room for trying to determine what we can and can't fund. Do you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate, notice that he's done it in Word. That our system will time out. And you can see
Yeah, that's right.
this big application, and all of a sudden you go to hit save, and it's going to say, hey, you've timed out. You got to start a new session. Well, when you start a new session, guess what? It don't auto save. You got to go back in and type everything that you did type.
Please do it in Word. You'll save yourself some time. I did it in Word for two reasons. One, to save myself some time, but just to I can't imagine sitting out there listening to me for 3 or 4 hours. I sure can't imagine watching me type.
Yeah, every so often, like you normally do, you can go to the bottom and save, and then you can start, you go back to the top. So if you want to save something you already put in there, go to the bottom, hit save, then go back up. So you can do that during the time you're doing the applications, so you don't lose anything.
All right, we've told you what our problem is, okay? We've got a problem with folks speeding up and down Interstate 95, and we've got problems with high-speed crashes. And in an effort to reduce serious injuries and fatalities related to speeding and unrestrained drivers and passengers, RRPD seeks grant funding for a dedicated traffic enforcement officer. If approved, this officer will perform full-time traffic enforcement duties within Roanoke Rapids. In addition to conducting enforcement activities on I-95, traffic enforcement officer will also concentrate on hazardous intersections and thoroughfares in Roanoke Rapids where serious injury and fatality crashes most often occur. You can use the state data we have here. If you have data specific to your area, that you can certainly put that in here as well. All right. The grant request includes a request for in-state and out-of-state travel funds. In-state travel funds will be used to send the officer to GHSP Traffic Safety Conference. In the past, every year, now probably in the future, every other year at least, maybe consecutive years, we do have a traffic safety conference. This past year in August, was it August? It was in Raleigh. We're not going to be able to have one this coming fiscal year, which will be calendar year 2020 and 2021. It'll be in Raleigh again. Just to throw that out there, we will make sure every grantee that we have, they need to go ahead and plan on putting travel money in their grant to facilitate that travel to Raleigh or wherever it's going to be that to come. Well, it is, but it'll also travel to Charlotte. It's been in Charlotte. It's been in Wilmington. It'll be in other places. All right, out-of-state travel funds will be used to send the officer to the annual Lifesavers Conference. Folks in here familiar with that conference? Traffic Safety Conference, national. 2 or 3 years ago, it was in Charlotte. Next year, it's in Tampa. But it's something that I bet you 95% of the travel request, again, out-of-state travel, before you start booking anything, even though it's in your grant, there's an out-of-state travel form that is on the GHSP website that you have to fill out and get approval from GHSP before you can do that, before you can travel. All right, so let's cut and paste this into our grant. All right. This took how many of us the other day, Warren, to figure this out? You've got that one little area. How do I open that up, Sarah? I can't remember how to do it. It's there. How did we do it, guys? I'm sorry?
Use the scroll wheel, or you don't have a mouse.
Yeah, I do.
I think you have to save it. There you go.
I think I just clicked on the outside of it, but there it is. All right. So let's see what's next. All right. I actually looked up, but I don't want to get off this screen, so I'm just going to make this up as we go. All right. I think the agency has like 65 cops. We're going to say that they do have a traffic dedicated and that it's got 4 people on it. All right, their overall rankings. Anybody remember what that was? Again, hold on a minute. I tell you what, I'm going to go to this. Fatalities. All right, Halifax County. 43 in overall fatalities. Alcohol-related fatalities.
And that's gonna be on that box you're clicking on there, Stacy, that's gonna be something, well, it should be loaded on your application right now.
Should be what?
Is that gonna be loaded on the, so it's on some website? So I thought it was on that
Unrestrained
link
35.
right there. Yeah, is it on that link? Nobody is. Anyway, that box will be on our website, or it should be that link also. If it's on a link, it's on our website. So you can pull your county data.
38. And then I think, you know, what I hope a lot of folks are looking at, I think when I did this the first time, I went to young driver. $38. All right, so where are we at? Again, this next this section right here, this is for, we'd like to see everybody, whatever county you're going to concentrate your efforts in, if to list out your fatality rankings in that county. It should be pretty clear in your narrative, you know, where you're focusing your efforts. But above and below that, that is for law enforcement agencies only. Obviously, if you're and really we just want you to fill in, this is something we used to ask for after you filed your application, but I think we just, we wanted you to go ahead and provide us the information. So what are we looking for on this? There's a significant drop in the number of citations you've issued over the last few years, or a significant increase. Guys, y'all want to, Bob, you or Dave or anybody want to weigh in here? We are looking to see what you're already doing. If you're an agency that you ain't arrested any drunks last year, then that's something we're going to want to follow up on when we're evaluating these things. So let's.
Or if your numbers are, if you have 50 officers and you've arrested 2 drunk drivers and 5 seatbelt citations in the past year, that's going to go red flag to us
It is.
for a whole year.
Or you say you've got a issue with unrestrained motors being killed, fatalities, and you've already 4 seatbelt tickets in the last year. That's gonna weigh in.
And like I said, you know, manpower and the call for service, we don't want to hear that.
Yep. Nope.
It's don't want to hear it. They'll tell us right fast, take that sentence out of the application. How many times I've had that happen? Tell them to take that sentence out. It's not needed.
All right. So I've got my, I've filled it out. Now I'm going to come in and put my goals and objectives. So let's look at our goals and objectives. If it's a traffic enforcement officer, typically you can use fatality, overall fatality. What I like to see on a traffic enforcement officer, traffic enforcement, is something related to speed and to unrestrained occupants. So this is how it's going to read. We're going to reduce, the goal of this grant is to reduce speed-related traffic fatalities in Halifax County by 20% from the 2014 to 2018 average of 38 to 30 between October 1st, 2020 and September 30th, 2021. So that's what the goal looks like. It's measurable. We'll know at the end when when we're able to get to some speed-related fatality numbers, whether you met the goal or not. And the objective in this is to increase speeding citations. Now the numbers ain't gonna work out right because I'm not going to the other page to pull up what I'd already put in there. But basically you're going to increase your citations. That's how an enforcement agency is going to, they may do another one. There may be another objective under this. If you're holding a class, you know, you're teaching you're responding to or going to like a driver's ed class to talk to youth about you're going to do so many classes per quarter or so many classes per year or something like that. Education wise, you tell me how many, you tell us what is your objective to meeting that goal right there. But again, it needs to be something that's measurable. Yes.
So, Stacy, would it be accurate to say that for those non-law enforcement folks in the room, the goal wouldn't necessarily look that different than the objectives would?
I think that's an excellent way. I mean, remember, we're about saving lives on highways. I don't know why any of our goals, and we have some grants this year where maybe they're not tied in directly to fatality crashes. I don't know why any of our goals should be anything other than a traffic fatality reduction. I don't care if it's overall or if it's speed related, impaired driving, unrestrained. I mean, how can you go wrong? If that is your goal for spending federal dollars, federal highway dollars, and partnering with us, that's our goal. That's GHSP's mission. Mark told you that at the beginning, is to reduce fatalities and serious injuries in traffic crashes. All right, that's your goal too when we're paying for traffic safety efforts. Your objectives, we'll work through them. Everyone in there has, where are you from?
Smart Start, Pender County.
Okay, what do you want to do?
Child safety.
Do child passenger safety.
Yeah.
That's bingo. It's unrestrained. It's overall fatalities, and it's just you're not going to rest your way. Well, somebody said a while ago, was it you? That's not the first time I've ever heard. He brings up a very good point. I'm a cop. I'm enforcement centric, but even I realized 100 years ago, with the proliferation of gang activity, you cannot arrest your way out of a problem. I agree with you 100% on what you said, but it is something that's very, it's vital in traffic safety also. Absolutely, your goal is going to be related to traffic fatalities, but your objectives are going to be completely different on how you want to get to that goal. We just encourage you, make it measurable, all right? You want to do so much of this or so much of that. All right, let's see if it will let me, let's do some more cutting and pasting here. All right, and then my objective. You know what, we're just going, well, hold on. All right, I've got my goals and objectives in. All right, here are our, remember, we're dealing with an enforcement grant here, so we want to reduce overall fatalities. Again, these numbers are going to look a little bit different, but this year, because they're going to be tied in more to our highway safety plan. But in that they are dealing with traffic enforcement, basically, you can check everything in here. Except, I think in the past, we hadn't checked motorcycle stuff, have we, guys? But for the most part, we may send you back and say, hey, you need to check this goal, or you can uncheck that goal or whatever. But, all right, so personnel. Let's see. All right, police officer. Or any other position. If it is a percentage of a position and you want to put that in, I would encourage you. If it's 50% of a position, then yeah, we want to see that. But remember, we want to know where the other 50% is coming from, because we can use that depending on where it is to show a match or something. That is always helpful. Let's say, remember, you don't want to start at entry level. If not, you'll be coming back to us after you realize that mistake in the first 3 or 4 months and asking for more money. So let's say 60 grand.
So may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Besides police officer, for those of us that are law enforcement, give me another reasonable personnel position title.
Well, we pay for some positions. I can tell you what we do right now. We pay for research positions and for activities that are performed at NC State and HSRC. I'm sorry?
Like an educator?
Coordinator positions we pay for with some, guys, jump in here, with some of our DWI courts.
DWI courts.
Uh-huh.
For blood lab positions.
We pay, do we fund positions at MAD?
Yeah, man, and then we had in the past, we had teen safe driving positions, we pay for, they do a teen safe position, and as the coordinators run through usually the health or the hospital there.
Uh-huh.
We fund 2 outreach grants specifically related to youth. One with the Cabarrus County Health Department,
Uh-huh.
which calls themselves something different, and then one with Vital Healthcare. So we provide, we fund those positions, working specifically on their outreach areas. There's a lot of areas that, in addition to officers.
CPS efforts with Western North Carolina and with DOI with their CPS program. They have, are you familiar with them?
I've not taken, they do the special needs CPS
In
training. I have not
WNC,
taken it.
in Western North Carolina? They,
That's great.
I'll be honest with you, and you can tell them that I've said this, if everybody that we partner with ran a grant the way those 2 ladies run a grant and work as hard and are as dedicated as they were, man, we'd all be, if we were as dedicated as they were, we'd be in good shape. Yes, sir, they're a good group. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to speak candidly here, okay? I don't think it's going to come up short anymore if you do your homework. If you're at the top, even if you have to put in there at the top of your range, okay? We don't pay for overtime. Remember, on an enforcement grant, on an enforcement position grant, we're not going to pay anybody time and a half for overtime. But I'll be honest. 40 hours a week times 52 weeks a year is 2,080 hours that NHTSA is going to let us, is my math right? 2,080, is that right? Well, I mean, I didn't just do that in my head, but that is considered a full-time position. No cop is going to work 2,080 hours in a calendar year. They're going to take off. They're going to have extra duties. It's not going to happen. So if you plan ahead for what that you think they're going to make, it's going to end up being less. They're not going to. We have had grants in the past where they do max out. At the end of the year, half the personnel grants we have, these guys sitting over here are sending them back saying, take off this much off salary, you've overextended, or take this much off of fringe, you've overextended. We can't tell you what the right answer is on that. If it seems exorbitant to us when we're reviewing the application, then we may ask you for additional information.
I like to get a question, but when you're putting in, especially a position, put in a position you think the person's going to take it. Don't put it in entry, like officers, don't put it in the entry level, because we know as a traffic safety grant, you're going to want a veteran officer
Yeah.
you're working. Make sure you put in your, who you think, or the salary of a person that you think is a veteran that wants to work that position. Because if you put an entry level officer, and then you turn around and hire somebody in that position that's been there for 10, 12 years, that's where you're going to run short of money.
I just want to make sure, like I said, because I want to make sure, because on our end, if we were budgeted for that $60,000 and we said this is what we're paying, and we came in at 5805, then we would have so much paperwork we got to do to verify that we come in under. You see what I'm saying? I just want to make sure we didn't have to do anything extra on y'all's end.
No, now, I will tell you, we evaluate every year. When you fill out you're going to fill out a final accomplishment report and go back through and look at your goals and tasks or your goals and objectives over the years. And based on what you give us on your final accomplishment report, these guys over here are going to fill out a final evaluation report that makes sure you have all your quarterly reports and all the paperwork that's required to be in there is in there. They're going to evaluate it as part of our monitoring process to do that. But one of the things we do on there is see what was your liquidation rate for the grant. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, and I've only been here this is my third year. We have had grantees, state, big grants that I bet 3 weeks ago they wanted to ask for additional money. And we went back and told them, no, you only liquidated this percentage of your grant 2 years ago, and you liquidated this percentage of your grant last year, negative, just move some money around. If we get to the end of your grant and you can justify us giving you more money, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Where that's going to get in, if you're not spending all your money, you're not spending down in your grant, then the subsequent years after that, then we may ask you to, why do you need that much? You hadn't spent it the last 2 or 3 years. I expect that on just about all of our enforcement grants this year because of the changes that we made. When agencies put in for these grants last January, there was nothing, we didn't know that the guidelines we had changing guidelines. So I'll be honest with you, I don't know what it's going to look like for us this time around. I don't know if we want to adjust the amount of money that we are tying up. If I give you, see, I'm about to type in right here, I'm about to type in 25,000. We're spitballing here. We just need a number in here for the purpose of completing this. Okay, I've got $85,000 in what's probably going to be funded with 402 funds, okay? All of that money is obligated to your project if you're from Roanoke Rapids right there. If you're only going to spend a total of 50 of that 85 because they're only working a limited number of hours or we can't reimburse those hours, we don't want to tie that money up unnecessarily over the course of the grant year. Not to mention there are limitations on how long we have to spend certain money. So I want to make sure we're as accurate as we can be in what we're estimating for salaries and such. And I don't know, I don't know what that looks like right now because we're going to have to evaluate our grants at the end of this current fiscal year, our position grants where these guidelines have come into place, and see what we want to do in the future so that we are using our money wisely, I think. I sure didn't mean to get off on that tangent, but it's something we got to think about going forward. Yeah. All right, so if you'll look right here, total personnel cost $85,000. We'll go scroll back up right here, and if I'm not, look at there. All right, remember this is a 85-15. It's the first year of a traffic enforcement grant. Luckily, because they know, especially us cops that are doing it, you don't want a cop with a calculator. There are a lot of smarter people that aren't, but luckily it does the math for you. So it'll populate right there what we're talking about. So now we're going to go down. Remember, if you have contractual services, you're going to contract with somebody else, okay? For services to be provided here, this is where you're going to include it right here. Now, we are going to ask for, and once the grant takes place, once the grant starts, I'm sorry, that was improper. Once it starts, we're going to ask you for a copy of the contract. And remember, it's got to have the federal provisions in it. We can provide those for you, but most of them do, but we want that contract in the grant system so we can refer to it if we need to. And then your pass-through, just like we are, we're a pass-through for federal funds. We have to abide by all NHTSA's guidelines. If you're going to be giving that money out to somebody else, you've got to make sure you're doing the right thing with federal funds as well, or that they are doing the right thing with federal funds. Commodities, again, Most often what we see here are office supplies, paper, what else? Educational pamphlets. Thank you. If anybody in here is familiar with GHSP, they are familiar with the fact that they know what swag we got. You see stuff that says booze it and lose it, click it and ticket. If anybody's ever been to the fair and hadn't cursed this organization over those dad blame clickers, then you just hadn't been to the fair. No more of that. There is no giveaway stuff. There's no handouts. There's no, actually the adage or the saying is, if you can have fun with it, you cannot use federal highway money for it, okay? So none of that stuff. Nothing with, no shirts with your names on them and your badge and GHSP. It's not, we can't do it. If you're awarded a grant and you have any questions whatsoever, ask first. Ask first. We will help you. I talk to Bill Naff every week, whether he's working or whether I'm working, to get clarification and make sure that I'm staying in my lane. It's almost, it's apropos with what we're talking about here, that I'm staying in my lane so that I can keep our grantees in their lane, Just don't want to get left the center or run off the road. Commodities go here. All right, equipment. We are, you'll see there's some drop down things here. Let's see what we got in here. We got a vehicle, we got motorcycle, modal data terminal, LiDAR, radar, speed display signs, pole sound mounted only, in-car video system, uniforms. That's I actually have a ticket in right now with Sarah and her group to have that removed. Traffic vest, having that removed. I will, I've said before, I'll say again, we do no body cameras, flashlights and other. And it doesn't need to be these. You could free type anything, what you want to in here. But doing a car, $35,000. These are set values for these things. That doesn't mean you can't go out and spend $50,000 to purchase and upfit a patrol vehicle or any other piece of equipment for that matter. It simply means we're only going to reimburse you whatever the percentage is of $35,000. We're going to reimburse at most 85% of $35,000 for this particular grant. Go ahead.
Big issue here too. All the equipment that we have in drop down, you have to sign certifications saying it meets Buy America standards. And for most of the cops in here, Dodge Chargers are not built in America and not filed.
Tell them what's the only vehicle they could have bought this year, Bob.
The Ford.
Explorer. Yeah. That Interceptor model.
Or the Chevrolet Tahoe, but everybody's saying are too expensive.
And Durango? Durangos.
And we're talking about anything single item over $5,000.
Right.
Anything that's over $5,000, one single item.
So the Pender County Smart Start, no body cameras?
No, but you may ask for a piece of equipment.
Training and outreach materials.
The reason the threshold at $5,000, that's a NHTSA, but also at $5,000, we're tracking that equipment. Every piece of equipment in January 1st through January 31st, we're going to get 150 applications in for grants, some continuation and some for some new grants. And there's going to be a litany of equipment requests in there. For every one of those grants that we approve, the equipment listed over $5,000, I will provide when we submit our highway safety plan, all of that is listed in our grant or in our highway safety plan. If over the course of the year, the grant year, somebody wants to buy a piece of equipment that costs more than $5,000, and then I have to seek NHTSA's permission first before that can be approved. In addition to that, all of that equipment over $5,000. Hold on, let me give some clarification here. All right, right here, that says a mobile data terminal. When they put this thing together a century ago, basically computers cost about laptops cost $6,000. Now you can go get one that will just about run the space station for $300. It's called a Chromebook. That right there is if it's more than $5,000, if you're going to spend more than $5,000 on it, it has to be Buy America compliant, first of all, and then we have to track it. So every year that we come and do a site visit, we're going to make sure you got your computer. At the end of the grant, or when that computer, which is probably 6 months after you buy it, is no longer serviceable because it's antiquated now, you have to get our permission, and we have to get the permission from NHTSA for you to be able to get rid of it. Okay? We have to track and maintain and keep up with all this equipment. We have a very extensive computerized database that helps us keep up with equipment that we're tracking for years ago. Usually the only time it comes up with getting rid of equipment is when they're selling cars. Because there are some cars, some hard-working young officers sometimes will keep a car looking so nice. They've kept so much armor on the thing that you can't, you can stick to it just about, but it's in good shape. If it's going to sell for more than $5,000, then we got to jump through some hoops, but we'll walk you through that if that ends up being the case. For the purpose of a cop that we're funding, right here, that's the equipment that we're able to pay for. And again, just to stress, anything you put right here, we're limited to that amount. It don't mean you can't spend more. Now, you're looking.
Would car seats for distribution, would that be a commodity or an equipment?
It's equipment, and you're going to have to help me here. We are limited on the percentage of money that we can spend on car seats. I know that we buy what we can through DOI and through the special needs seats that WNC Safe Kids does. Bill, help, can you? 5% of our total 405? I thought it was the number 40 is for something. If you put in to buy car seats, as we're sitting and going through our grant review process, we're going to have to be judicious in what we're able to do there. Because I will tell you, I think we have just about over with the CPS grants that we have right now.
But those, in my experience in my county, we are no longer receiving child passenger safety restraints through those avenues.
Through CPS, but it doesn't mean they're not still.
Kids, through DOI.
But it doesn't mean they're not still purchasing them though.
Could be.
So
They're not.
I understand. No. I am not saying.
They used to come through
I
these
understand.
avenues.
I understand.
Right. So we're just looking for new funding.
I got the information on where to see the seats.
I can't. I'm sorry. I'll just tell you that there is a limit on the amount of money that can go towards the actual purchase of a physical child passenger safety seat.
And that may be an avenue for one of what Stacy was referring to earlier, around partnerships with others. That may be an opportunity there around partnerships to help provide for all of you those areas that can't generally be funded or where it's a little tricky. You may find other partnerships.
Okay, and yeah, I mean, I know Shannon and them at DOI, they still get a boatload of donations from the Walmarts and those big box stores of the world, I think. Huh? I'm sorry.
It's not coming though to the local level where we're located.
Well, we will. All right. I'm sorry.
It's not your fault.
I'm not gonna. All right. Again, I'm gonna stress it again. In-car video systems. Be careful with those. In some cases, you can buy. I think WatchGuard does one that you buy that daggone in-car camera system, and it comes with a body cam, and it will sure list out the price of the body cam. And we've gone back and had people have to reimburse us for that. So where we caught it after the fact. We didn't do, so be mindful about that. That's basically what it is. That's what it pays for right there. All right, we're going to keep going. There's other items typically cost limited to less than $5,000. We try to reserve for right there. All right, in-state travel. Remember, they said they were going to go to the traffic safety conference. We make sure that we'll give all our grantees, unless they just we encourage it. Require is such a dirty word. We encourage it, so we're going to give you money to come. It's going to pay for your hotel and your registration and your per diem and your ground driving back and forth, mileage and everything else. So we're going to give you some money for that. Let's just say it's that, and then you're going to Tampa this year to go to the Lifesavers Conference. Just putting stuff in there, okay? All right, there are no indirect costs, so let's go back and look. Luckily, it did it for us. It's populated everything. So basically, the total amount of this grant is $87,750. Feds, you're gonna for every $85 that for every dollar that you spend, we're going to reimburse you 85 cents of that. The next thing we talked about when we get to the bottom of this thing are your monthly tasks, your quarterly task, I'm sorry. Okay, this is a police grant, right? It's an enforcement grant, so we're going to check this box right here. Please take the time to look at that and what you've got to do. If you're getting an enforcement grant with GHSP, you're committing yourself to a minimum of 1 nighttime and 1 daytime seatbelt initiative per month. You know what? That includes either HV, high visibility enforcement, or it can be a checking station, right? Which I ain't never understood seatbelt checkpoints, but a minimum of 1 impaired driving checkpoint per month. So it is an enforcement grant. Your goals are focused on speed and occupant protection, but at the same time, you're going to go out and arrest some drunks every once in a while too. And I'm not going to read them to you. They're right there. All of these require, we encourage every one of our partners to the greatest extent they can participate in all GHSP campaigns. You'll see Mark across the state, him and Miracle, working on campaign kickoffs. Miracle and Cheryl and Mark just did a big one that the governor attended out in Mebane a couple of weeks ago to kick off the Click It or Ticket campaign. Click It or Ticket, right? Yeah, it was Click It. Over the campaign, and I bet there were it was very well attended and got some good media on that. So we encourage all participation in all campaigns. For the purpose of enforcement grants, what participation means, that is, after those campaigns on a weekly basis, you are reporting through our STEP system what your activities were. Go, huh? What?
You're expected to do that. You're supposed to do that.
I'm not even saying it. You'll do it. You'll do it. Yes, sir.
On the, like the last one says, attempt to utilize the Batmobile. Does that mean, like in Union County, we have a countywide task force, and it's multi-agency, we all attend. So they had one November 16th, there was a Batmobile present. I attended, but I didn't request the Batmobile, set up a checkpoint plan, nothing like that.
We're going to want you to organize one.
Organize, okay, so not just attendance, it's organized.
Host one.
Okay.
Fair enough? Okay. We're going to want you to organize. Okay, let's get our tasks in here. Our quarterly tasks. And this in there. All right, I apologize. I have a sneaky feeling that if I don't do each one of these, then it's going to tell me, it's going to give me an error. And, oh man.
That's why you say that you were.
But I didn't time out. What happened? But I didn't save it. Look, we did the main part of it. We got through. You got a chance to see what it looks like, how to get into it. I can tell you, once you get those timelines, and we're getting close to being done anyway. Once you get the quarterly tasks in, you keep scrolling down, and when you get to the, I would like to, let me see if I'm still, hold on one second. That did not save, did it?
But if you wanted to.
Nope, hold on a minute. I did the one the other day. Hold on. Okay, once you save it, it's going to give you an application number right there. You see that number at the top? It starts with a 1. All right, that's your application number. For me personally, that's how I track every grant that we deal with. All right, once an agreement is made, once an agreement is created for your grant, that starts with a 2. And it's a big long number like that we kind of track agreements by the last 4 digits. When you submit a claim for reimbursement, it's going to create a number that looks like that starts with a 3. And then if you ever do a budget revision, it's going to be a 4. The reason I bring that up is because when you go in to you know what? We got through most of this before it started acting up. I think we did okay considering we're working off an air card. When you go in and start working on your application, Sarah, please correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to go in and ask that you, it's going to, what was the choice there? To pull up their application, the saved one?
The saved one, you go into search.
I'm sorry, y'all.
You're doing pretty good on that, probably.
Yeah, it did.
Stacy, is there anything in particular you want to cover on the quarterly task, even though we can't pull that up here?
Basically, I was just going in there. Once you get all that done, you're going to go to the bottom of the application and you're going to hit save. All right, once saved, you are provided with that application number. Write that number down, at very least, write down the last 4 digits of it. You can review the application going back in by selecting display application, and you can edit the application by selecting change application. All right. We'll be sending these things back and forth to y'all. You're going to submit an application, and no way is it going to have every one of the T's properly crossed and every one of the I's properly dotted. And all them guys sitting back there, they all think they're way smarter than the rest of us anyway, so they're going to send it back for no other reason than just to send it back. And because nobody can be perfect. That's how you're going to go back in. You're going to pull it back up to change the application. Yes, sir?
Letters of support, will they be weighted? Are they attached into it?
There is a way when you go in here where you can add attachments. And so I know that if again, we're data driven, and we you know, absolutely. Attach whatever you want to be considered. I wouldn't discourage that, not one bit. I think that we've had folks do it quite a bit in the past. Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
Not to go back, what are
I'm sorry?
Approved commodities, like examples?
Oh, my.
Like the little clickers that you can have fun with?
No, you can't do those. I just, I thought about it when I was saying it. A lot of times it's office supplies. It's stuff you have to basically, you have to keep using over and over. Previous use.
Consumables.
Huh?
Consumables.
That's the word. Consumables. Thank you. Not necessarily, and you know what, since somebody said consumables, y'all ate lunch today, you got lunch. There are requirements that we have that the federal government imposes for being able to do that. So if there are, that is something where there are some restrictions. Honestly, that's why you signed in today.
And if you didn't sign in, please sign in before you left, or you won't get a grant.
Yeah. No, but that is exactly why you signed in. You know, we have to, Jackie put together an agenda. We had a sign-in sheet. That's how we're able to justify. It never hurts that you've got NHTSA sitting in the room to be able to verify that we did what we said we were doing when we had all that food. But at the same time, that's why we do that. Yes, sir.
So basically,
I'm sorry.
when we're planning our checkpoints, like multi-agency checkpoints,
Uh-huh.
we can include funds in our grants for meals throughout the checkpoint, or is that something?
You're probably, that's not going to get, that's probably not, that's, if that's sunlight, I wouldn't.
Say something. One thing about, it's about saving your work. It's good, but if you save it, it doesn't submit.
Oh, you're wearing Duke stuff.
You still have to submit your application. So there is a button on the very bottom that says, and some people think they saved it, that they submitted it, but it hasn't been submitted yet.
No, we probably not. We came to, my guys came to me. I just gave them my credit card and let them, when we hosted them with Raleigh, yeah, well, you're welcome to go back and ask the next guy, but I don't know. But yeah, we paid for stuff like that. Yes.
Is food for like a community event for the community members to pull them out for education? Is that considered?
That's going to be a tough one to. I don't think so, because you got to have it. It's meeting, it's training. It's not community. It's not a community event. Otherwise, there are limits on. I know for us, if it's not. No, you can't. We can't do that for outreach for community events. No.
And then, separate question. You had mentioned that we can kind of go back and forth with the grant specialists to talk about editing it and whatnot. You were saying at one point that was during the January timeframe, but are you?
It'll start in January. If you hit submit, the minute you hit submit on that thing, where you're sending it to me, then I'm going to take a quick look at it, print it out, and then I'm going to give it to one of these guys to depending on what program area are you in. What are you thinking about doing? Just
Pedestrian safety.
Pedestrian safety, okay. Kevin Buster, stand up over there, young man. You'll probably be dealing with that guy, okay? And it'll go to Kevin. Kevin will read it, and he'll give it a once over, and he may just send it back in the grant system and say, hey, make these changes. He'll give you something. He'll be very specific about what needs to be changed or what needs to be amended or added or taken out or anything like that. You'll go back and forth with him. In a lot of cases, it's not just on the grant system, and we all encourage this. He'll talk to you on the phone. He'll send you an email, he'll follow up with an email, and make sure you know exactly where we're going from there.
So is it recommended to submit early? Because does that conversation end at the end of January?
I'll tell you what's going to happen. This is going to be a new grant. So your grant, whether it's done, you can hit send on it on January 1st. It's unlikely the grant review folks will have a chance to even discuss new projects, like Mark said earlier, until we discuss existing projects. We see what money's left over, what's in and what we're able to fund from there. Yes, sir.
I was going to say a couple of things. One is to reiterate what David said. The save button and the submit button are two different buttons. So if you save it doesn't mean you submit it unless you didn't submit it. So sometimes when people move and hit save, February 1st, and they realize they have not been submitted. So, we should do that. Yeah, and in terms of the previous grants versus new grants, as you can see here, some of the plans, unlike a lot of agencies, we may have awarded a 3-year grant, but we asked that grant applicant to put in, despite the fact that the plan was for 3 years, each year we're going to ask them to submit some additional stuff. So we go through every grant with a fine-tooth comb. So keep that in mind.
Let's make that real abundantly clear too. Let's say you put in a grant and you have a 2 or 3 year plan, okay? So first year is a new grant, first year of the grant, and you still have to put in an application next year as well. Same thing for enforcement grants, any grants, everybody reapplies the next fiscal year. There's an application process we go through each and every year. If you're awarded, like I said, the enforcement grants up there for a traffic officer are 3 years. You're not putting in one grant application for the next 3 years, every year. Yes, ma'am.
So from the standpoint of a new grant, it seems like everybody else is going to be looked at first, and then the new grants will be looked at. And say I put in for a 3-year grant for $150,000. And when it comes to the pot at the end of the day for the new grants, there's not that much money there. Do you say, sorry, can't fund you for that amount of money, or do you say, I can give you a total of $100,000?
We could do that. That's always a possibility. Well, it's like I said earlier, you'll have people putting in for 4 traffic cops, or 4 of this, or 5 of that, or 6 of those. They want 75,000 widgets to go with their grant. And we might say, no, we can fund 1 position and 5,000 widgets. Okay? So in my short tenure here, we have tried to do more to spread the money rather than seldom do you ever see where we're financing or funding, like, say, and I don't mean to exclude anyone, especially this side of the room, but the example involving enforcement and cops is the easiest thing for me to go back to, but you'll see where they want a sergeant and 4 cops. And what we'll say a lot of times, the first time they hear back from David or Warren or Bob or Kevin, it'll be to say, hey, we'll give you one, we're willing to, you need to change the application and just include 1 police officer in it.
Can I say one thing, Casey?
Yes, sir.
Maybe I misunderstood your question, but we fund 1 year at a time. If you want a 3-year grant, you may put in, don't do it, put in there how much it's going to cost over 3 years. Just put in for that 1 individual year. Then the next year, it rolls around in January. We'll approve you in October, or you start in October. Well, January, 4 months later, or 3 months later, you got to put in another grant. Then you put in for your 2nd year, what you anticipate. Now, you go ahead and get your mind set on, kind of understand how much it's going to cost over 3 years. And you can put that in there if you want to. All we care about is
in the narrative.
1 individual year, that first year.
But back to Stacy's example, one of the things we might do, we may like your grant so much that we need to free up a little bit of money. So we've got to go back around to adjust some other grants that we like to fund, to make sure that we can provide some semblance of what we like about another grant.
Okay. That makes sense.
So I hope that's helpful. And I don't want you to get the impression that we exclude new grants. We don't. We do new grants every year. We're happy to see them, especially in new ideas that we know the data says we need to work on.
And I'm going to tell you, everyone that writes an application and submits an application through GHSP, I can attest that you are given your due consideration. Whether you're a first-year grant or maybe you've had a partnership with GHSP for the last 8 or 10 years, you're given. It's an impressive and very tenuous process that the folks sitting on the back row through there go through, and it includes NHTSA. Probably 90% of the time in the years that I've gone through this, I've been through it 3 times now, NHTSA's been on the phone, and where we could have a video feed, or at very least they have access to the same thing on the grant application that we're going through. And we rely on them and depend on their input, and to make sure that we're being good stewards of the federal dollar, but also that they have to include their perspective on what we can do to reduce fatalities.
So these guys are the review committee, including myself, and Bill and NHTSA is part of that review committee. Often we'll meet 2, sometimes 3 times a week during that period I mentioned to you to go over those things with a fine-tooth comb. The final decision is made by the State Highway Safety Office Director, which is me, the Governor's Rep for Highway Safety, which is also me, and sometimes I argue with myself a lot about those things, and then approved by NHTSA. So, but I rely a lot on the expertise of my great team to give me recommendations, and I generally rely on that quite a bit.
Any more questions?
Just to clarify, January 1, we can access that and actually begin filling out the application. Not
But right now, you can start working on that stuff on a Word document, because you're going to cut and paste from a Word document, because that was actually, I did that on purpose. Okay? I stood in here and I put that all that work on that application and let it time out in front of y'all so that you would see exactly how that works. It was brilliant on my part. Yes, it was. Look, go to the website. All the paperwork and the stuff you need is on the website. If you want to put in for a grant and you have not already gotten access to the grant system, I would encourage you to please start working on doing that over the rest of this week. We'll get you in there. I would imagine if there are 40 agencies in here, 40 different agencies in here, then Sarah's sitting down there shaking her head right now because she knows she's about to get requests for 40 different agencies to give them access to the system. Please do start working on it now. We will be there to help you or to provide whatever guidance you feel like you may need, or if you just need to bounce something off of us, by all means. Yes, ma'am.
So if we do not get the grant this year, are we allowed to apply next year? And are you guys available for feedback as to maybe why we weren't selected post-application?
Yes, and yes. Absolutely. We can, we'll do the very best we can without. Now, what I'm not in favor of doing is you may hear that so-and-so got a grant. We're not going to comment on why so-and-so got a grant, but you didn't, but we can certainly explain possibly. You know what, to Mark's credit, Mark prepares himself every year for the phone calls that he feels like are probably coming in because, you know, you may, because we weren't able to award grants to everyone that applied. And I think he does well. We try to keep up with it. What our thinking is when we're discussing these things, and we'll do our best to try to help you. We have had grants. I've told you, we've had them where I've sit through and we weren't able to fund grants this year. The same application came through the next year and we were able to fund. So we always going to encourage you to continue the subsequent years.